In 1927, studio head Louis B. Mayer had a dream to unite the 5 branches of the film industry: actors, directors, producers, technicians, and writers. His dream was to stop them all from unionizing so that he could continue to reap the rewards of their hard work and live the life he had become accustomed to. So he summoned 36 of the most prestigious names of the time to a banquet and explained his plans. And after collecting $100 from each of them, they formed the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I found that the best way to handle filmmakers was to hang medals all over them. If I got them cups and awards, they'd kill to produce what I wanted, old Louis B. said. And on May 16th, 1929, at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles, the first Academy Awards was held. And today, many, many years later, Moronic Logic is proud to present Golden Boy. Welcome to the first ever Academy Awards from 1929. And the nominees tonight are Chang, A Drama of the Wilderness by Cooper and Schuldesheim, The Crowd by King Vito, Sunrise by F.W. Murnau, The Jazz Singer by Alan Crosland, The Circus by Charlie Chaplin, The Racket by Louis Milestone, Seventh Heaven by Frank Orzage, and Wings by William A. Wellman. Welcome to the first Academy Awards from 1929 and episode 1 of Golden Boy, an Academy Awards podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Cahoon. You might know me from my Hitchcock podcast, presenting Alfred Hitchcock, which is on YouTube and slowly to be on all of your Spotify podcast services as the Hitchcock Challenge. That show, we break down Alfred Hitchcock movies chronologically. We do everything on the show chronologically from the beginning. And we get into super deep dives. We do research. We read the books about these people involved in making these movies. It's a ton of work. And that's why those episodes are very slow to come out. They're labors of love. This show is a labor of love. However, it will not be as heavily researched as that show. We're not going to break these movies down for you scene by scene. We might get into a couple of interesting tidbits about them, but primarily this show is about bringing these movies back, looking at them through a modern lens and deciding, are these movies any good? Are they worth watching? Are some of these movies should be left in the past? Every episode will have a rotating co-host. I'm going to force one of my friends, family, experts, one fan from the Hitchcock show to watch all of these movies from a given year, the nominees for Best Picture, and decide which one should have won or which one they like the best, basically. I would like to thank my executive producer, Jessica Goldstein, on this show, who has helped in all of the preparation I've had to do in getting this material and research together. I'd like to thank Sam and Lance, my Hitchcock cohorts. And I would like to introduce my first guest tonight on Golden Boy. He is someone that I might know from having worked together with on past theatrical productions, both writing and directing, and a little bit of acting. And he is someone that the people of New York and New Jersey might know as radio host Bucci from WFMU. He is also a very popular, it's a very popular show in my household, and you can hear it worldwide. I will have links in the description down below. I'll let him tell you a little bit about it. My first guest tonight, Cyrus Letty.
Hey, Kenny, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, man?
Happy to be here.
Are you excited to do this?
Yeah. I just want to take a little bit of issue with your introduction. You said you might know me from such productions as we've done before, but we definitely know each other, right?
Well, I was getting my notes together for the show, and I did not have how I know you written down anywhere.
You got to write down how you know me to remember that you know me.
Yeah, well, everything I read, everything I'm saying is from a note right now. There's literally cards all over the place. So
Yes, your serial killer room.
yes, that's the room. If you could see the other side of this camera.
Really, anyway, I'm really glad to be here, man. This is really exciting.
Yeah, I just described Bucci a little bit. Do you want to just kind of, for people listening, explain what that show is and kind of where they can go to hear it?
Sure. So it's a talk radio station. I'm sorry, it's a talk radio show. It's a music station primarily. It's a freeform radio station, WFMU, and so the DJs have complete control over their content. And my show is Tuesday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. And like I said, I do a talk show, take calls, and kind of we engage in kind of topics that are destined to broaden the minds of the listeners and everyone listening, in fact. I
wrote down that you ask avant-garde questions. Does that sound kind of...
I don't know about avant-garde, but I try to do topics that kind of engage audiences, and I like to tackle, let's say, stupid topics intelligently and intelligent topics stupidly. And
you succeed admirably in
yeah. Well, thank you, I think. Yeah, and it's a comedy show. It's not too serious, but it's yeah, check it out. And the WFMU in general is a fantastic radio station, and whatever your musical preference, you're bound to find a show that lines up with that.
Awesome. I'm glad that you mentioned that it's a comedy show, so we can all expect that obviously your commentary tonight will be hilarious.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
Speaking of tonight, these 8 movies, had you seen any of them previous to this last month where you had to watch them all?
No, I have not. I did not see anything, which is kind of one of the great things about this project, because these are movies that I would definitely never watch. And I just, and silent movies in general, are something that I find hard to get into. But yeah, I really like the experiences of at least watching these things. And now I can say that I've seen all the movies that were nominated for an Oscar in 1929.
Yeah, I think starting the Hitchcock podcast that we were doing, it was the silent movies were definitely really hard to get into, and there's a certain language and rhythm to them that is hard to just jump into one. And so especially like some of these movies like the Racket, where you're it's asking a lot out of a modern audience, I think, to follow the story.
Yeah, that movie in particular was pretty confusing, if I remember.
I definitely felt so, and that's having watched a bunch of silence at this point.
Sure.
But so we're gonna let me first break down these 8 movies that we're going to be talking about and why we're doing 8 and not 3. So most of these podcasts, and there are a lot of great Academy Award podcasts that I've been listening to in the last couple of weeks to prepare myself mentally for this. And I'll actually put a couple of recommendations that I listened to again down below in the description of this video, because they do great work. But one thing most of them do is they only talk about the 3 movies that were nominated for Outstanding Picture. And those 3 movies from 1929 were Seventh Heaven by Frank Borzage, The Racket by Louis Milestone, and Wings by William A. Wellman. So those 3 movies were the original Outstanding Picture selection. Now, the first Academy Awards had this interesting, they were making this stuff up on the fly. So they had 2 Best Picture categories. They had the Outstanding category, and they also had one for Artistic and Unique Pictures. For that, they had Chang, A Drama of the Wilderness by 2 directors, Marion Cooper and Ernest Chodeshak. They had The Crowd by King Vidor, and they had Sunrise by F.W. Murnau. Sunrise won that Unique and Artistic Picture, but later on, they went back and decided that the Wings win for Best Outstanding Picture was the one that counts, I guess. The other 2 movies I've added into this list are The Jazz Singer which the jazz singer they considered ineligible to run for any Best Picture because it was the first movie that had synchronized sound. So they felt like this thing's just it's not a fair competition. So they just gave it an Oscar. They got a special award for the what was it, for producing the jazz singer and for the technical achievement. Yeah. And the other one is the Circus, which again was just given by Charlie Chaplin, which was again just given a special award for writing, acting, directing, and producing the Circus. He was originally nominated for all of those categories, and they just felt he would sweep them all, being Charlie Chaplin. So they just decided to give him an award. So those 8 movies, Cyrus and I are taking together, and we're going to look at them all and decide which of those 8 is the best picture from 1929. And you made a list, right?
A list of what?
Oh, yeah, put the movies in order.
I ranked all the movies, and it's going to be a very. I'm really interested to see how our rankings line up.
I feel like I can't even really get. I feel like if it's my feeling was 4 of these movies I did not like one bit, and if
really? 4 of them, wow,
not one bit, and 4 of them I felt were. There's merits to them all.
Well, I liked one extremely, period. I like one very, very much. And the rest of them, I liked to some extent, and then there was a few that I really didn't care for at all.
Well, the other thing I should mention too is a lot of these films are probably not in the exact form they would have been in the 1920s.
What do you mean by that?
Wings had a restoration at some point in recent times, where depending on what sound, like the soundtracks are all going to be different on some of these. Like Wings, they redid the soundtrack where it had sound effects. So do you remember sound effects when you watched Wings? Like, do you remember like?
No, I don't think the version I saw had sound effects.
Yeah, I don't think mine did either, but they did apparently have. There is a soundtrack out there with sound effects in it.
With the Circus, Chaplin composed a new soundtrack in like 1967, right? Yeah, and it had him singing that song over the credits, "Swing Little Girl," which I don't care for Charlie Chaplin's singing voice. It's very melodramatic, and it's got that kind of tenor that kind of grates on me. And also just like him adding another kind of credit for himself to that movie.
Well, that movie has some interesting backstory, because it was not available from this Oscar until like the 50s, I think, or 60s maybe, where it was just, that's where he decided, he wanted to re-release it. He didn't like the movie for a long time because he was going through a lot of stuff while the movie was being made.
Yeah, he was getting divorced and everything, and like
going through a serious, scandalous divorce.
Definitely deserved that.
His mother died.
Yeah.
The tents and everything, the sets all like either blew down or burned down. Like there's a photo of him sitting outside just a wrecked set, just looking sad. He had a lot of things go wrong.
Yeah, and the IRS was after him for back taxes or something also. Yeah.
I mean, he eventually gets blacklisted from Hollywood, I think, during the communism era.
Well, yeah, not in 1929.
Yeah, but later.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Talking about these movies, so you were able to find them all pretty easily?
Yeah, all but one was on YouTube. I forgot which one was on. I had to watch on Tubi. I don't remember the one. Which one was that? It was
probably The Crowd, actually. I had to send you the Internet Archive link.
Oh, that was Internet Archive. Yeah, a few I watched on the Internet Archive, like Chang was on there, and The Crowd, and I think Sunrise was on Tubi, now that I'm kind of remembering.
I think Seventh Heaven was on Tubi.
Well, whatever.
Yeah. So they're all pretty available. You can watch them for free.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Probably the best one you can watch is Charlie Chaplin's The Circus on Criterion.
Yeah, that's definitely got the Criterion.
It's going to be your cleanest looking one, although Wings has been pretty cleaned up too.
Sure.
So have you done any research into this time period that we are watching these movies in?
Time period? Well, I mean, the one that I know just from my high school history classes, obviously it was on the the Great Depression was looming. So this was like the last gasp of the, the Roaring '20s and the Jazz Age and what have you. And also, it was really interesting to see how much World War One loomed in these movies. It was like a giant part of, obviously, Wings, but also I feel like there were other themes, there are themes of war, recently fought terrible war in some of the movies.
Yeah, World War One looms huge. I think Prohibition is going on during these movies. So
yeah, the Racket specifically tackles that.
Yeah, and I think that was until 1933 when it was repealed. So any drinking in these movies, if it's set in the United States, is they would be breaking all the rules, basically.
Do you think they actually used actual alcohol in some of these films, like in the Racket, where the guy's like, I don't know, swilling champagne or whatever?
All right, step away from Google. It wasn't illegal to drink alcohol during Prohibition, according to the History Channel. The 18th Amendment only forbade the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors, not their consumption. By law, any wine, beer, or spirits, or champagne, Americans had stashed away in January 1920 were theirs to keep and enjoy in the privacy of their homes. And now, back to the show. And that's basically it. So that brings us to the first Academy Awards, as I described in our intro very eloquently. Louis B. Mayer, studio head, wanted to unite the 5 major studios at the time. And this is the big question of this episode that I'm going to pose to you, Cyrus, and our viewers. What is a best picture? What do you think of when you're picking a best picture? What are you thinking? Because in 1929, they had 2 categories because they couldn't decide. Right. You have your financial box office. These are the ones that made all the money. And these are artistic, unique pictures.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that, where like Wings is definitely the movie that has this giant budget. It's this action movie. It's really dynamic. It's got all these battle scenes, some of them way too long. Whereas something like The Crowd is definitely more of an artistic achievement. And it's interesting to see the box office versus artistic kind of dynamic.
Yeah. So what's your personal, when you watch the Oscars, like, what are you hoping, is it kind of just a gut feeling?
Well, I've been let down, Kenny, by the Oscars so often, that, I text you my disappointment every Oscar night. So I kind of stopped, picking that, but I guess that's a really good question. Like, what do I think of when I think of a best picture, and what constitutes a best picture? I guess it's one where the filmmakers have complete control over the process, and the most thoughtful, well-made movie is produced. I mean, I think my definition of the best picture is probably the definition that everyone has kind of that, I just want to pick the best picture, the best overall picture. That's what best picture is. But what people's definition of that is going to vary. So, I mean, I kind of lean towards a more artistic, I like auteurs, I like, a director that has this vision. So I like to see that vision kind of be brought to the movie, one that's not made cynically, but personally.
Best picture, right? We're talking about what makes for a best picture. And I think part of what you're saying which is kind of what I agree, which is that there's something to the whole auteur theory. I like when there is a unified film behind one director. I think of movies by directors. So I think of, this director made this movie and I liked this movie. I don't really, movies where I don't know the directors, I might enjoy, I might like love. There might be like an MCU or a Spider-Man movie, and I'm like, I enjoyed that quite a bit. I don't know who the director of that movie is, for the most part. I'm not paying attention to that.
Sure, but I love new directors and like a new vision, because sometimes you're like, I'm bored with all these fucking, can I swear?
I'll allow it.
Fucking Scorsese movies, like, where it's just like, they're just like, it becomes a prestige film. Or Spielberg is even worse, like, it's just like automatically elevated to the top based on director, when all these younger directors are making more interesting films, and are probably not getting the recognition that they deserve. In fact, usually aren't getting the recognition that they deserve. Like, I don't know, like the Daniels with Everything Everywhere All at Once, you know.
Yeah.
In the most recent example of that, but they did actually get the Golden Boy. They got that Golden Boy.
So yeah, let's talk about Golden Boy for 1 second, because you're actually the one who coined the phrase. And I was thinking about it, like,
well, I don't know about coin.
You said it to me, and I'm like, why does this sound familiar? And I remembered at all the old Oscar parties we used to have, like back in the day, you'd always walk around with that big pipe, and you'd be saying things like, "Who's gonna get that Golden Boy? Who's getting," and you'd slap someone on the back way too hard. And that was like your thing for a while. Do you remember that?
I was going through a real rough phase, if I remember. There was, I think I had just lost my job recently, and I had also just been through a couple of shaky relationships. So I was really, yeah, it's true. I was really kind of clinging to something, and I did base a big part of my personality on the Oscars, and specifically, kind of like being the grand ringmaster of these Oscar parties that used to held, which we got really crazy,
You never picked the correct best winner though back then. You were always
no, I was shooting wildly with my picks. I don't remember exactly what some of my picks were, because I don't remember when we stopped doing these things. I think there was an incident we had to stop doing it, but
I think the year Braveheart won, I think you broke the door leaving. You were so mad about that win. I think I don't even remember what it was up against, but
yeah, that would be an interesting. Why don't you do another podcast where, well, I guess you're doing that now. We're reviewing every single. Well, we'll review Braveheart in what, 17 years when you finally.
Why don't I start at the? Well, that is a good point, Cyrus. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is the question. All of I've lined up a few co-hosts, and one of the main things they all ask is, they want to do the movies in the 70s. They want to do the 80s. They want to really dig in on those films.
And sweet sound, those sweet talkies. They want to get.
Yeah. Everyone wants the cool films they heard of, and all these other podcasts that do Academy Awards, they have to figure out ways to start later and then come back to these at the beginning. So, but here's the reason I do everything chronologically here is because, where's the camera straight ahead? We do everything chronologically. Hold on, where's the camera? We do everything chronologically here because filmmaking is an art, and all arts are not created in a vacuum. They are created on the shoulders of the people who came before them. And when you watch these movies, particularly I look at the Racket or even Wings. Let's take Wings as a perfect example. Wings, you don't get to Top Gun Maverick without Wings first. That cockpit shot they use in Wings was invented for that movie. Putting a camera in front of, it's famous from Star Wars. It's famous from every movie where people fly. The first time they put a camera there was in Wings. It's where it starts. So we start at the beginning, so that by the time we get to Top Gun Maverick in, what did you say, 17 years?
Yeah.
The people who are still with us listening to this show will know that's from Wings. They took that from Wings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You could definitely see the echoes, if I may use such a word, in modern movies, in these selection of movies from 1929, and camera shots that are now taken for granted were, completely reinvented. There's or invented, not reinvented, for these movies, and they had to do it in much more complicated ways. And again, you see all these things, the use of montage, the use of dissolving, the use of tracking shots and dolly shots, like that were pioneered in these movies that continue to this very day, which, yeah, I mean, I think I think that's a really great point, that, you kind of get the accumulation if you do it chronologically, though it is maybe a little bit more difficult an entry point for someone who's not used to watching silent movies or have heard very little about it. But I find them interesting because, I mean, what are you going to talk about? The Godfather for the 8 millionth time? Like, I mean, we get it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why here we are, and let's get this thing rolling. So we're gonna go through each of these movies, and we're just gonna kind of give some quick thoughts. So don't give away which one is your favorite yet.
Sure.
But you can give away which one was your least favorite of these. So what's number 8? Which movie here is not an Academy Award Best Picture for sure in your mind?
The Jazz Singer.
Oh, if I had an explosion sound effect, I would do it right there. Let's share the screen. We're back.
I can't see that poster. Am I supposed to see it?
Yeah, you can see the poster. So yeah, for those of you listening audio, we're looking at a poster of the Jazz Singer. We're not going to get too crazy with this movie. This is what you're seeing. So
yeah, we're going to talk about that scene that's depicted on the poster also. That's one of the most upsetting scenes in a series of upsetting scenes in that movie.
All right, Jazz Singer, give me your takes here. Why is this our lowest picture?
Well, I mean, obviously one of the main reason is the extensive and horrific use of blackface in it, which I always kind of knew about and heard about and knew that was the one thing I knew about this movie other than the sound aspect. But what I did not know and what I learned in watching this movie, that he's not just in blackface on the stage when he's performing his dumb songs, but he's in all these scenes that are like these sentimental melodramatic scenes where he's weeping and crying over his poor mother and in blackface, and like there's all the dramatic crescendo of this movie. He's completely in blackface the entire time and weeping over his poor mama, and like it's horrible. It's
sort of the build up to the blackface.
And then once the blackface occurs, it doesn't end until the end of the movie. So I mean, obviously the latter half of this movie should be put in a fire. You know, it's just. And I don't particularly care about, it was normal for the time, or Al Jolson was bringing, black music to a white audience and he supported black performers, or all this, kind of, justification that is given to this movie. Like, I don't care. It's just really, really unpleasant to watch. And I'm
glad to hear you say that, because just on that one topic of the blackface, because there's a lot of, film, this movie more than any of the others has had the most written about it and the most discussed about it. And one of the main topics is the blackface used in it. And as far as I'm concerned, this show isn't about apologizing for the past or putting it into that historical context. I'm looking at this from today, and this is just racist garbage to me.
Yeah. And like, again, like, he used it for performance, for whatever reason. But it's just those scenes at the end where he's weeping and crying, and we're supposed to feel something, but it's just complete. I think if he wasn't in blackface, I think I would find those scenes pretty unwatchable because of the thick layer of sentimentality that's smeared over that and the entire movie as a whole. But then there's at the end when he's like performing for his mama and he's singing another one of his seemingly inexhaustible mama songs. He's got like 3 or 4 songs about his mama, and his mother is just loving it. She just loves the blackface. And I don't know. It's just terrible. But on top of that, and then there's also there's the issue that, what kind of jazz is this? This is the worst jazz I've ever heard in my life. And it doesn't sound remotely jazz, even the jazz of the time. I mean, it's clearly this sanitized, goofed up jazz music, and made even worse by his hammy performances of the songs. Broad, lame performances. So there's that. And then it's just, again, the melodrama is just sickly, like his stupid, conflict between, am I gonna sing at temple, or am I gonna perform for this audience, my dream? Am I gonna fulfill my artistic dream, or my dream, or my family obligations? That's like the conflict at the heart of this movie. But I don't care. And also, I don't understand why he can't do both. Like, why can't he sing at his father's deathbed and then also do the other thing, like the next day? Like, the old man dies, like, after
They
he sang.
scheduled them the same night, though. That's why.
Yeah, but why can't? All right, so he misses. But then there's also this thing where it's like, well, I can't come, but it's like a dress rehearsal, right? I mean, he's like, I can't miss the dress rehearsal. Like, what is going to be happening in this dress rehearsal that is not happening on the night? He's got the songs down. He knows what he's going to sing. It's like, I don't understand why he couldn't go to the dad's deathbed during the opening. I mean, during the dress rehearsal. But whatever. I mean, aside from that, he fails in saving his father with the power of his song, because the old man drops dead right after. It's just, and then, like, I just didn't care for it on any level. I just found it to be pretty maudlin and lame. And then you get to the blackface. I think the most interesting part of the movie was the insight and the that it gave to the a very insular Jewish community. I thought that was kind of interesting, and how, like, very Jewish the movie is. And it feels like that might have been a even more of a breakthrough than the sound. I mean, I just feel like that was not probably depicted, though I don't know, in a mainstream movie at the time. Just how, like, it goes into it's just unapologetically a Jewish film, which I think is the most interesting thing. And also, that guy who played the Cantor Rabinowitz, like, I guess he really was a cantor. So that's kind of, yeah, he was like the biggest cantor of them all, or whatever.
Yeah, I totally am in agreement with you on this movie. I think I knew right away once he started singing I think when he was a kid singing, I was like, ugh, this is I'm already not interested.
That kid should have quit. Like, yeah, it's like,
I agree with you. I think I had read someone had a review saying, like, it was like their father or grandfather's favorite movie, and because it spoke to that kind of Jewish experience, I guess, of people coming to this country. I don't know if there were Russian Jews escaping from. I think that was a big thing at the time. I was reading.
Well, Jolson was from what's present day Lithuania.
Yeah, Lithuania. So yeah,
Jolson's a terrible actor, by the way. He's terrible. It's interesting when the sound comes on, and, like, he actually has to, like, say this dialogue, and we're hearing it. It's just terrible. Yeah.
I think one of the newspapers at the time that I'd read straight up said, because a lot of things were praising it, but one was like, yeah, it's like a reel for his, like, music career.
Yeah.
The movie, basically.
Definitely. It's definitely some ad for, like, I'm going to use this to springboard to get more people in the vaudeville seats.
Yeah. That hammy singing style, though, the eyes big all over the place, just how he's suddenly 50. Like, he was like a kid. And then
that's the other thing. He's like 58 years old in this movie. And I had a question. So he leaves home, right?
Yeah.
And then does he not see his family for like 4 or 5 years? And then he kind of breezes back in, and he immediately starts, like, his mother is really big, really important to him, apparently, even though he didn't see her for 48 years. And then he immediately starts, like, hitting on his mother. Like, there's that horrible scene where he's playing piano for him, and it's one of the few sound scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And he's like kissing his mother on the mouth, and, like, he's saying, oh, don't be so kittenish, and, like, it's just really gross.
Times were different back then. That's going to come up in another movie too, kissing on the mouth. But this movie apparently was based on a play, and the play was based on Al Jolson's real life career. The guy who wrote the play had seen Al Jolson perform somewhere and really liked him and got to know him, I guess, and wrote the play. And then they were going to make a movie and they were going to cast someone else at first, but then they were like, no, we'll just get the guy who it's based on.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think he's supposed to be like 20 something, I think, in this movie. They want us to believe. And no way. Yeah, I don't know. I know jazz is kind of not something you can really describe. Like it's not like something you can put to words what jazz is. You just kind of know it. And I feel like this does not feel like jazz to me in any way, shape, or form. This sounds like weird vaudeville. He's doing that affect with his hey with a voice that's very annoying.
Vaudeville voice, yeah. That booming vaudeville voice. Yeah, it doesn't have any swing or anything to it. It's just like I said, quite lame. It's interesting you bring up other people playing Jolson, and that was an idea they were kicking around, which may have been better because they probably would have gotten an actual actor. But there's like sequels to this movie.
Yeah, they made like, are they sequels or they just remake it?
No, there's a movie called The Jolson Story, which was in 1946. But they had another person playing Jolson, this guy named Larry Parks. And then there was another one called Jolson Sings Again, 1949. And I don't know who played him in that case, but yeah, it was just someone else. And I think he might have dubbed the singing parts of those sequels. But it seemed like his career kind of, thankfully fell off a cliff after a certain, after maybe even this movie,
Yeah, I don't want to wish ill on anyone, but I would assume that people from this time period, if you study them enough, they all had tragic endings. But this did not make me ever want to see him again. It made me want to avoid him, if anything.
Yeah, there was that scene or that line of dialogue from where his mother is watching him perform for the first time or something, and she says, he doesn't belong, Joel, meaning her son, Jackie or Jack, doesn't belong to me anymore. He belongs to the world. And like, he's going to be like this super.
Don't put that on us.
Yeah. And I don't think so. You keep him, Mama.
Yeah, no, he's all yours.
Yeah, no thanks.
So they got this guy that directed it was a guy named Alan Crossland. He had done shorts with sound, which is why he got this job.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he had done a couple of short. This is the first feature movie with synchronized sound, but there were shorts before this.
Oh, cool.
So they brought this guy in to do the jazz singer. He died soon after this movie, like within 5 or 6 years after, in a car accident. So there's not a lot on his resume afterwards.
Right.
But so the sound, just to talk about that for a second, you're coming out of the silent era, and just about everyone who saw this movie at the time would be like, this is a marker, like that things are changed,
absolutely.
And I think it is clear, but I think you can't confuse the fact that this is a marker, that it did something that changed the film, with that meaning this is a good movie.
No, it's just like a movie that would be completely forgotten if not for the sound element. And it would have been any movie. I mean, they just kind of got the ball rolling with this movie. But yeah, it's not worthy of anything other than just a footnote in history, in my opinion, where it's saying, oh, for a sound movie. But then I had a question about the sound, actually. I don't know if you know the answer to this. Like, why isn't the whole movie in sound? Like, they have scenes, but it's just like the title cards and it's a regular silent movie. And then the songs are in sound. It's, all the music it has sound in it. And then that scene at the piano with his mother, there's a little bit of dialogue going back and forth. But why wasn't the whole movie recorded in sound? Do you know that?
I know it was very difficult to record it in sound. Like if you saw the movie Babylon, they had to get it right on that one take, because the recording sound would actually be recorded right onto the film, so with the image. So if you don't have it lined up just right, it toss the whole thing. So, that's why these scenes are longer. Like they're usually these little blocks of sound, where he's going to sing a song and he says something before it or after it, or maybe I think the dad comes in at one point and yells no, and I think that might end that sound and it's back to silent. So it's little chunks they were able to do because it was just too difficult at the time. And it's heavy equipment. Did you see Babylon that was not from last year?
No.
They kind of go into the silent, like just like this big, heavy, hot machinery. They had to film inside. A lot of silent movies were filmed outside with no roof so they could get maximum sunlight. So like they had to do it in a enclosed space. It's just very challenging at the beginning. So I'm assuming, again, I don't know this Vitaphone process that they used, but I'm assuming all of those challenges were at play.
Sure, that makes sense. I found it interesting, again, to go back to this scene with him and his mother at the piano, because that's like the most, feel like that's like kind of one of the centers of this movie, kind of establishes that he loves his mother, even though he went away for 48 years. But like the woman who plays the mother, I don't know her name, but like seems kind of like nervous and shocked that or like they seem to be just as like, trepidatious and excited that they're actually talking. And there's a kind of like a nervousness about their line deliveries that definitely feels like, because they were just used to saying whatever they wanted, and it seemed like and it was that what they called that acting. And it's just interesting that it seemed like the performers were just as kind of like thrilled by the use of sound as, I guess, the audience.
I guess the wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet line, that was something Jolson used in his shows. Like that wasn't like he wrote it for the movie, like, oh, this is gonna have a double meaning in the movie when I say it and you heard it. He just used that in all of his shows. He'd do a song.
Oh, okay.
Hey, wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet. Here's my next song, and then just go into it. So I wonder if that was even like part of a script, like, or if they just were like, just do your routine, bud.
Some of it does seem ad-libbed. Like some of it, the sound scenes do feel just kind of very loose. And very kind of off the cuff. I mean, the audience must have been their fancy hats and fedoras must have come off the top of their heads when they heard this sound, though. I mean, it was just
they would have been blown away. I mean, one of the early sound quotes that I'd heard was that when sound movies first started, it was when people had to stop talking. Apparently during silent movies, talking during a movie was no big deal. It's like you got an orchestra playing in a movie, you're just talking to, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And as soon as you got sound, you're like forced to pay attention to the screen, because if you miss something now, it's you're behind in the movie.
Yeah, it must have felt to the people who were the filmmakers of this movie, they must have been like, we gotta get on this sound thing immediately. And it reminds me, this is a strange parallel, but it kind of reminds me of the early 90s, the transition from hair metal to when grunge started breaking, and all those hair metal dudes were like, the gravy train has left us.
Done.
First heard Jane's Addiction or whatever, they're just like, but
this movie, the amount of despair and like harm this movie caused to a lot of people in the industry at the time, all these silent actors who didn't have voices or spoke with like a foreign accent or just weren't going to fit in, like their careers ended with this movie.
Over. Yeah, over.
Yeah.
And it's too bad that such a terrible movie had to do that, though. It would have been something else.
It would have been. I would recommend people at home watch Blackmail, the first UK English sound movie by Alfred Hitchcock.
Is that an Alfred Hitchcock?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm tying this in with the other show. Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail, great first sound movie with none of this inherent straight up racism just right in your face. Mm-hmm. All of these movies from the time, though, it is interesting. It is when people say, oh, well, blackface was a thing back then. I'm like, I've watched a lot of movies and some people never used blackface during that time. And I'd like to think it's because they knew they shouldn't. And
yeah, I mean, I think if Alfred Hitchcock wanted to put, he would have done it.
He did use blackface in one of his.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. I mean, like people weren't thinking about that. They were thinking of it, if they thought of it at all, as some sort of like tribute, but I don't even think so. I think they're straight up mocking black people with it, and like that was the appeal.
It's such a shameful. I'd like to think that if I lived at that time, not only would I have not liked the blackface, but I would not have liked this movie and his performing, even without the blackface. Like that music.
If I was watching this movie, I would have left it like, whoa, sound. Like, I can't wait for a good movie to have some sound.
What's the second American movie that's with sound? That's the question. All right, let's move on then. Let's move on.
Excellent question that I do not have the answer to.
No answer. All right, step away from Google, folks. We've got this covered for you. The first all-talking picture is not the jazz singer. It's only partial. The first all-talking picture is Lights of New York from 1928. And don't go, oh, like you knew that. None of us have ever heard of this movie. None of you have seen this movie. All right, and now, back to the show. No one knows. And no one should know the first one, because this one, honestly, it's an asterisk at the bottom of a textbook. Don't watch it.
Don't watch it.
And don't watch, I hope you agree with me on the second one, but don't watch my worst movie on this, of the 8 movies, Chang, A Drama of the Wilderness. By Marion Cooper and Ernest Shodashak. It's a movie, it stars Chantui as playing herself, the wife, and Crew playing himself, the pioneer, and a monkey named Bimbo.
Yeah, Bimbo, which is definitely not the monkey's real name. It was definitely an American name that they
funny name by the Americans. This is a snuff film disguised as a movie. This is a couple of masculine film director dudes went to another country and were like, we're going to kill a bunch of big cats and animals. And we're going to film
violent, right? Or modern.
Violently. These were actually killed. Every animal killed on screen was killed for us.
Yeah, I think they would have the movie should have had that thing at the end where all animals were harmed during the making.
All animals, even Bimbo, who survived.
Oh yeah, those monkeys were probably tortured within an inch of their lives to get the reactions that they wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all presented as, and some people have said, oh, well, this might be one of the first documentaries. No way. These might be real people and they might actually live in that geographical location, but they were not killing leopards, tigers, and, herding elephants daily. I've watched enough of these survivor shows to know these big cats stay away from people. You might get one and you have to deal with it, and that's something you're dealing with in a month or two. But this is like, they're like every day they're killing them.
They amped up the drama and they probably compounded a lot of things, and they definitely restaged stuff. And like, oh, why don't you trap a leopard and shoot it in a pit? Oh, why don't you do it again? Why don't you keep killing leopards?
Yeah.
There's a scene with a baby elephant in that movie that it's just stomach churning, where they like trap a baby elephant for some reason and then like drag it around, and it's just like, ugh. But yeah, I mean, I found it interesting, as like this kind of early documentary, but it's clearly, you can see the hand of the directors in it.
And to me, this is just as racist, because this is like some white dudes being like, look at these savages and their savage environment, and look how violent they are. And like, it's treated as to bring the adventure home to you on the screen.
Yeah, but also framed in an American context, where they're like, oh, there's all these like title cards which are full of like American slang and like,
oh yeah,
what are you doing, you rapskull, or like like the monkey is talking like a 1930s jazz man or whatever. It's just very
yeah, it's like American Home Videos, or where they do the funny voice over the pets. Is that American Home Videos?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. They definitely have. There's a scene with a bear, a mama bear, and a baby bear, where they're like, "Come on, Ma, play with me. You want a newspaper? Calvin Coolidge."
Those bears were later killed for the. Oh yeah. And so the thing that's interesting, here's the thing that is interesting about this movie. And again, this is interesting in the film studies way, not in any other way. These two directors later went on and did King Kong in 1993. Yeah. And I watched King Kong a couple nights ago, and holy moly, that movie reminds me of this in so many ways. First of all, the movie stars a director wanting to get some more exciting action in the jungle. So he's basically these two guys stand in, and he hears about this King Kong thing, and he's going to risk everything to take these guys to film it. that movie's pre-code, and you look at a still and you're like, that looks like claymation. But when you watch the movie, it's terrifying, and they're not scared to show people get smushed, people get picked up and bitten. He's like ripping a T-Rex's mouth apart at one point, and blood's gushing out. It's like very, very violent and terrifying to watch. And you can see that's these guys' masculine MO is, we're going to show these animals. It's going to be these bloody, violent battles. They have a crew of black actors playing like the tribe at King Kong. And again, similar to Chang, it's like presented as, we're visiting them in their native habitat, and look at their crazy things they get up to.
Yeah, it was. I guess one of the directors was almost stampeded by elephants at the end of that climax of the movie with his stampeding elephants, which they probably, attacked with rifles to make behave in the way that they wanted to.
Yeah.
But he was almost killed, which would have been good. I would have been fine with that, I think.
That would have been the way. Die for your art.
There
were interesting shots and things of, the Jaguar or whatever running right at the camera, but then when you start to think, what did they have to do to get that shot, and you torment this poor animal?
Yeah. There's a really interesting sequence where some leopard is chasing Bimbo through the woods, and it's really good. It's really exciting, and there's all these close-ups of Bimbo, kind of acting scared. Again, they're probably squeezing its balls or something to make it do that, but it is actually a good scene, kind of a well directed scene and kind of dynamic. But aside from that, I don't know. I guess they might have thought they were, portraying this family in a accurate way, but they definitely, I don't even know how I could find very little about the process of like filming this, other than like the animal stuff, like how they picked this family, if they were even related, if it actually was a family of living in Thailand or northern Thailand, I guess, where they filmed it. So I could find very little about that, and with the how they went about actually making this movie.
Yeah, the filmography looks like they did a few documentaries similar to Chang before this, so they were probably. I feel like the King Kong director story that he tells in that movie is their backstory, is that they were just going around with their cameras, barging into local villages and being like, we're going to shoot this thing here.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
So, and that's in Unique and Artistic. That was nominated in the Unique and Artistic. I guess Unique is what described it, because I didn't think it was Artistic.
No, I don't think it was really. I mean, it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, I don't know, like a window into a new world. But yeah, I mean, I guess so. I didn't care for it at all, Kenny. That is actually my number 7 movie too.
Oh, really? Okay, good. We're pretty much, we're in line then. That was my 7 and 8. I ranked Chang under Jazz Singer, but just because I don't like animals being killed for it. No animals were killed in the Jazz Singer, but both of them don't like. All right, where do you want to move from here? Which one do you want to?
Oh, just one thing more. I mean, did you ever hear of the movie Roar? It was made in the 60s or 70s with Tippi Hedren, a Hitchcock
Melanie Griffith, right? Was she their daughter? She's her daughter in real life, I think. Tippi Hedren. I think she was a kid in that movie. Roar.
In Roar?
Yeah, because it's like a family.
It's like a family who's living with lions, and I think lions were actually hurt in the making of the film. And like it was in these things where like they're trying to get lions to behave in they're trying to turn lions into actors. But it's a batshit movie.
So yeah, I guess for those of you who watch all 8 of these movies and Chang is your pick for Best Picture, then go see Roar. It's probably the next recommendation. Do you want to round out? I don't know where to go from here. It's hard because Chang is so unlike the other movies. Nothing segues nicely from that.
So do you want me to tell you my second my next pick, my number 6, I guess.
Yeah, let's move up. What's your number 6?
Seventh Heaven is my number 6.
Oh, wow, we are in total agreement so far.
Really? How about them apples?
Yeah, how about that? So Seventh Heaven, what's your grief with this one?
My grief, I don't know. I mean, I thought there were interesting elements of it, but again, I found it to be pretty sentimental, pretty melodramatic. I didn't really get the relationship that was at the heart of this, like this loving relationship. I don't feel like they really had any particular chemistry, but I guess that's a movie. All these 20s movies, all these early movies, like has a similar kind of romantic kind of dynamic where it's just like this poor woman is like crying and crying, and then the man gives her like a flower, and then she's in love immediately. Like that definitely happens in a lot of these movies, if I've noticed. Yeah, I didn't care for it. I thought there were some interesting sets, but it was just a little mawkish for me.
So let me just do a quick Seventh Heaven, directed by Frank Borzage. Frank Borzage won Best Director for this movie.
Oh, did he?
Yep. Our actress, Janet Gaynor, played Diane, won Best Actress for this movie and for 2 other movies.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that she won her Oscar based on not one movie, but like 3 movies, including one of the other movies in this list, right?
Yes, she's in Sunrise as well.
Sunrise, right? Yeah.
I think Street Angel is, I didn't write it down, but I think that's what the name of the third movie.
Street Angel. So she's a little bit of a street angel in this movie too, where she's like, is she a prostitute, or her sister definitely is some sort of woman?
I think it's implied they're both prostitutes living together in a house, sisters, to make ends meet. I think that's the implication, although you could read it as maybe she was not yet a prostitute. I don't know. I think she was a prostitute. The way she's treated by the other characters.
Yeah, immediately. That like, so I mean, she is very, at the beginning of this movie, she's like, I think the first time we see her, she's being whipped by her sister. Her sister loves whipping people.
Oh, yeah.
And she's just like, but she's like being whipped, and then yeah, and then she's kind of mistreated or disregarded by Chico, the male lead.
Chico, played by Charles Farrell.
Yeah, he's left to he leaves her kind of lying in the gutter after rescuing her, because
he's a sewer cleaner, right? I mean, that's his job, and his dream is to get above the sewer, to work on the street. He
really wants to be a street sweeper. There's like this caste society where street sweepers are like gods. They're seen as gods in this Paris kind of area. And yeah, I mean, I kind of like that. Like his dream was not really that grand. He just wanted to be a street sweeper. Like that was kind of interesting, and like, yeah, I don't know. And like he was like an inspired, supposed to be an inspiring kind of influence to what's her name? Diane? Is that their name?
Diane, yeah. Diane and Chico.
Yeah, where she is like, she thinks of herself as, nothing, as dirt. She believes that she deserves everything that she gets. And then Chico says, oh, look to the stars, always look to the stars. Look at the world with optimism, and that, I guess, that rubs off on her at the end of the movie. I mean, obviously, Sunrise, the title Sunrise.
Well, you're in Sunrise.
Oh no, I'm talking about Seventh Heaven.
Seventh Heaven.
Oh, sorry.
Actress.
Yeah. Seventh Heaven. Well, I guess, what's Seventh Heaven? What does the title refer to?
So Seventh Heaven is because Chico lives on the 7th floor of this tenement building.
Oh, okay. Is that
and
it?
He brings her up there, which I will, while we're still here. The shot, this is probably the one decent shot in this movie, is of them walking up the steps to his.
Oh yeah, I definitely noted that. That's a really cool shot. Yeah, absolutely.
And Hitchcock uses it in Blackmail, which is 2 years after this. So again, talking about lineages and things coming up, it's interesting to be like, he would have seen this movie, you've been like, that's a good shot. Maybe whether he liked the movie, who knows? But this is how these things inspire what comes on later.
Yeah.
So, and then they would always say, what was it? Chico, Diane, Heaven was like their when he
Oh
goes.
yeah, that was their mantra or whatever. That's right. Though they only said it once, I think. But
No, they would look at the clock at a certain time of the day, like when he went.
11 o'clock it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what they said. I like that scene where he's like that. He has to say it every time. They're doing like the somewhere out there at 11 o'clock every day.
Yeah.
Even when he's in war, he's like, I gotta do this thing. I gotta like stare off into the distance. And
Hold on, guys.
it's like, we're at war, you idiot. Stop
Yeah.
somewhere out there in the middle of this horrible battle.
Which I think so. This movie is like in two parts, really. There's like this first part, both parts I don't like, but this first part is, he's the sewer guy, and he lies, says this woman, Diane, who's a prostitute, is his wife. He treats her absolutely miserably until just so that the police think they're married, because they have this charade going that they're married, so she won't get arrested.
Right.
And then she has to be super nice to him until he lets her live in his flat and finally decides he likes her.
Yeah, and then he like cooks them. Like it's funny, like they go to bed or whatever, they sleep in separate beds.
Yeah.
And the next day it's super domestic. She's like, please she's like cooking him dinner or breakfast and making him coffee. And
He's like, no,
like
no.
he clearly likes it. But he is he's trying not to show it because he's, I think very quickly he's pretty smitten with her, but he's just pretending and he's kind of hiding behind gruffness and masculinity.
I think that's one of the things I hate about this movie going back is that it promotes this weird masculine idea, and it's in all of these movies to some extent, or most of these movies, this masculine idea that like by loving a woman, you can fix her. Like you're going to fix her life. She's going to come out of the gutter and she's going to get her act together because you're a good guy and you love her. And it's all about, it's such BS. Yeah. And Hollywood has taken that concept of just like a woman in peril and man's going to come save her just by the virtue of, what does he say? He's a remarkable fellow constantly.
Very remarkable fellow. That's his like little, he's very self-satisfied in this movie.
Oh yeah. Undeservedly so too, honestly. I think he's an attractive actor. I think.
Oh yeah, he's they really he almost has this very modern look to him. He doesn't look like a silent movie star. He looks like I don't know. Yeah, they got a good looking guy.
Yeah. And Janet Gaynor was fine with what she had to do in this role. She wins an Oscar for it. The sets, I just felt like everything felt like, some of these other movies we're going to talk about as we start to get to what I think are the top four, like having more of an art to them where sets are like developed and they have a vision. This movie felt like Hollywood backlot sets and like, hey, we're going to rush to get this thing done. The war footage looked like stock footage.
I think it was. It really did not look great.
Yeah, you're just watching guys march for like, and you're like, is this actual World War I? Like, why is it? They just stuck it in the movie.
Yeah, there's one scene where there's like a pretty big production where what are they, invading a French village or something? I might be getting that confused with another movie, but it looks like they got a bunch of like hundreds and hundreds of extras to swarm, or it looks like a big production, but maybe that's stock also. I don't. It's hard to know.
Yeah, one of the things I read just the other day is like some of these silent movies, like they would borrow shots from other movies and they would actually clip it from the movie itself. Like, so Buster Keaton would take, there's a shot in the crowd of New York City where he would just go to the actual, because they only have limited amounts of these films, and he'd cut it out and then put it in his movie. And then you'd rewatch the movie years later and you're like, wasn't there a scene like that in there? It's like, no, it's in Buster Keaton's movie now. But I feel like this movie feels like that because all these battle scenes just feel like, Chico's not, we don't see Chico in any of them. They're just.
No, that's true. Yeah. That's probably goes along with your theory that it's not from this movie.
They were like, we need war footage. Just cut it out of this guy's. And didn't Ed Wood, he made all those movies.
Oh yeah. That was all
just using clips he found from other movies. Yeah, I don't have a ton more to say on this movie, to be honest with you.
I like his buddy Goblin. I like that guy. I don't know why he was called Goblin, but that's the other street sweeper. They call each other comrades.
Was it Gobin or was it Goblin?
I don't know. I thought it was I think it's spelled Goblin. Maybe it's Gobin. I don't know.
Gobin.
I like that guy's mustache. I was confused by the end of the movie where Chico apparently dies, and then someone tells Diane that he's dead, but actually he's not dead. And like, why did they tell? Like, it's not like he got lost in on the front somewhere. He died in like some officer's arms, or apparently died. So why did the officer say that he died when he knows that he was blind?
Yeah,
Yeah,
three people come in and tell her.
Dramatic thing, like, but it's clearly like the officer's like, yeah, like he should have said, no, he's not dead. He died. He got blinded.
Yeah.
And that's the deepest honor, because now we can't look to the stars because he's so blind. So that's like the last part of the movie where, Diane says, "I'll be your eyes as you look to the stars," and something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. People at the time, there was a Chaplin movie where a blind girl, City Lights, where a blind girl, sees. They play on the metaphor. Oh, can you see me now? And people loved that. So maybe there's something to going blind and true love, and in the 1920s that really struck a chord.
Oh yeah, they definitely used. I mean, Chaplin and City Lights. It's like speaking about melodrama, like they use them as like sentimental kind of props because I don't know.
Yeah,
that kind of leads into the next one though, if you want to keep going.
Well, let's lead into the one. What's the next one you want to talk about?
Oh, the Circus.
All right, let's go. The Circus from 1928, directed by Charlie Chaplin, was given a special award for writing, acting, directing, and producing The Circus. And that's why we were talking about this one tonight.
Yeah, it's I like Charlie Chaplin, a fair amount, I guess. But I found this to be a lesser Chaplin movie, definitely. And aside from a couple of things, mainly the thematic elements in the movie that I kind of like, in just relation to Chaplin as a performer, Chaplin as a clown, Chaplin as a comedian in real life, and then also it's kind of mirrored in this movie. And I found that to be the best part of the movie. But all in all, I found it to be just a very boring movie. And the stuff that he does in it is, you can see it in any other movie, like a better movie, modern times or whatever.
Yeah, no, this is probably the first time I'll disagree with you more on a stronger note, because I really, I think I watched this I watched most of these movies twice now. I had the benefit of that because I started this about a month before you. But this movie, and I've also in the last month watched almost every Charlie Chaplin movie that he's directed. So I'm over the top on Chaplin right now, just with what I've seen. And this is something I think about all Chaplin. Most of us have seen Charlie Chaplin stuff without seeing Charlie Chaplin stuff, because almost all of his gags from his shorts, and even some from this, have been reused straight from the source by Looney Tunes, by Donald Duck. There are jokes that they just stole from him. Like, I mean, I guess back then it was all whatever.
Wait, Charlie Chaplin stole from Donald Duck?
No, Disney and
the other way around.
The cartoons took from Charlie Chaplin. They would take the gags he used, and then they would redo them. There was one where he accidentally swallows a whistle in a short. And I remember for sure, I'm watching the gag play out in that short. And I'm like, Daffy Duck or Donald Duck.
Yeah, there's definitely some
definitely had the scene where they swallowed a whistle and they kept whistling. And there's a lot of little gags like that that have been just recycled through cartoons later. And I think there's something to the simplicity of the joke that he's telling that is really interesting. And I'm a big fan of Little House on the Prairie, and I wasn't originally, but I became one because I realized that type.
Television show?
What's that?
Television show, Little House on the Prairie?
Television show. There's something about that writing that's so perfect for what it is. And I think Chaplin, there's a simplicity, but it's very complex. It's not easy to do comedy, and you should know for sure that.
Oh, yeah, I do know that.
But so, like, this is an interesting movie because a lot of the jokes he uses in The Circus are classic clown gags that you might have seen if you went to the circus back in the day, that he's put sort of a newer spin on. And the idea of the comedian who doesn't know he's funny I think is interesting, and I think it's funny for that character.
Yeah, he's naturally funny. He doesn't know he's funny. That's a plot point of the movie where he messes up all these clowns' tricks, and all the clowns hate him because he won't stick to the script. But he's funnier than any clown just by being himself. There's also a scene in the movie that definitely I feel like he reused in a different movie. The scene where he's like shaving, the clowns are like shaving each other. They're doing this bit where they're all shaving each other. It definitely reminds me of a scene in The Great Dictator where he's shaving someone. I forgot who, someone in the movie. And it turns into this mess of shaving cream and shaving. And I think that's set to maybe the Barber of Seville, or maybe, I don't know, maybe that's actually the Looney Tunes thing that I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
but
Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, I think it's that's the Bugs Bunny short. But anyway, there is a scene in The Great Dictator where he shaves someone like a maniac, and I feel like that the roots of that are definitely in Circus.
Right. But I think one of the things you have to take that's interesting with, say, Charlie Chaplin is like this character has an emotional arc that starts before this movie. So like if you're a person at the time watching any Charlie Chaplin, you're following. It's such an interesting concept that you have this character he plays, but every movie is not related. It's not an interconnected universe like what we think of today. There's no hand there, and so but there's an emotional arc to it. Like the tramp in the earlier things are just kind of funny. He's poor, so he's always up to no good. And then by the kid, now he's getting more serious. He's dealing with more adult situations. And he's always kind of spurned, or he doesn't end up with the girl at the end of the movie.
Yeah, at the end of the movie, there is a continuity in these movies in that, like, a lot of them end with him just kind of walking into the distance. I mean, this movie certainly does. Yeah. And there's a few others. I think maybe a couple of movies he gets the girl. Maybe he gets that blind girl. I don't know.
He gets I think he might get the blind girl. Yeah, that was from City Lights.
City Lights. But there is a thing where he's just kind of, he's a man alone, kind of drifting through the world and getting caught up. You can kind of see it as one long movie. And a lot of times because it's the same director, it's him, he has this vision and, his ambition kind of went up with these movies. And I mean, that's the most interesting thing, or one of the most interesting things about him, that he just had this complete control and he was just this massive star. And this was produced by United Artists, right? Like his production company.
It was.
Mary Pickford,
Douglas Fairbanks,
who hosted this Oscar ceremony,
the first Academy Awards. Yeah, him, Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Mary Pickford, I think, are just really interesting period characters from this time because they all played similar. They all not similar, but they all played a character, and they all made multiple movies with that. And it's not something I can't think of a single thing nowadays like that. That where it's one, like James Bond has different actors when it's not like every James Bond movie. It like does the Daniel Craig movies, they connect, right? Like does the Connery movies connect?
I don't feel like the Connery movies. No, but what's his face? There's the same villain in a bunch of those Connery movies.
So it's not the same. I can't think of anything that's like those.
Yeah, I can't think of anything either. They don't really do. I mean, does Tyler Perry kind of play the same? He plays that mother character in all his movies, right?
That's a good question. I'm not super familiar with those movies, but that could be it. But this movie, Back on the Circus, like the tightrope stuff, him and the other fella are actually walking the tight. They had to learn how to walk the tightrope for this movie.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
that's a commitment that is kind of nuts. I mean, maybe not if you're Tom Cruise, but I think a lot of actors, if you ask them, hey, you got to learn the tightrope.
Right. Well, I mean, Charlie Chaplin was the director and producer, so no one was forcing him to learn the tightrope work. He could have just been like, yeah, I don't know, you do it. But I mean, who knows if there was a net under that? You only see the tightrope. You don't know how high up he is, and there probably was a net like pretty close to the, right out of the shot. So.
Well, they use the technique, the split screen technique. So I think for that tightrope scenes, like the bottom half would be the audience, and then the top would be him on the tightrope. So yeah, you're right. The mattress is probably like 2 or 3 feet below him. So if he does fall off,
but he did a lot of his own stunt. I mean, obviously he did a lot of his own stunts, not to the extent that
Buster Keaton did.
But he was I thought it was I just found it to be pretty boring. And like, again, if you've seen a lot of Charlie Chaplin movies, you're like, yeah, I get it. I like the scene at the beginning where it's very confusing, where this pickpocket picks an old man's pocket, but then the cops show up and frisk the pickpocket. So the pickpocket stuffs the wallet that he just stole into Charlie Chaplin's pants.
Yeah.
And tries to go back for it after the cop is left, and tries to pick Charlie Chaplin's pocket for the wallet that he just pickpocketed. And then the cop comes back and busts the pickpocket for stealing Charlie Chaplin's wallet. And then the old man shows up and yells at Charlie Chaplin that he stole his wallet, even though he's a total victim of circumstance. And then there's this really great, the best part of the movie for me is when they have this chase scene throughout this hall of mirrors, and there's only like 4 or 5 people, but it looks like 1,000. And like, I just feel like that's a very influential shot. Wells used it. A lot of people have used that kind of funhouse mirror kind of chase thing. And I really like that. Was like the best part for me. I really like that. It made $3.8 million in 1928. That the Circus, which has got to be.
He was a mega star at the time. And also, I should point out now too, the Circus, like that last shot of him sitting in the ring was done.
I love that shot. That was another really good part of the movie.
He shot that 3 days after seeing the jazz singer. So I read that they play a super slowed down version of Blue Skies, which they sing in the jazz singer, over that scene, like to heighten like the end of the silent era, like him realizing at that time that he was in trouble, which is I prefer the Circus to City Lights. City Lights everyone is like, City Lights is one of his best movies. Stanley Kubrick said it was one of his favorite movies, and I think City Lights is a mess. I think it's a guy hanging out with a rich dude when he's drunk. He's his best friend, and then the second half he becomes a boxer. It just feels like a bunch of gags that get left over.
Yeah, I don't remember
that movie, but the reason is because he made it silent like 2 years into the sound era. Like he was like, no, like, okay, yeah, it's the sound era, but guess what? You're getting another silent film from me. I don't care.
Well, that's
I just want to say from the editing chair a couple of days later that I absolutely love The Gold Rush. It is my favorite Charlie Chaplin movie that I watched. I plan on watching this every New Year's Eve, and The Circus is right up there with one of my favorites, although I think I'm overheating at this point in the interview, so I didn't do it enough justice. Back to the show.
I like Modern Times. I feel like that's one. I remember liking that one.
Modern Times.
The one where he's walking down the street waving the red flag, and he gets caught up as like a communist.
Yeah, in a protest.
Yeah, I like that.
That's also the only time the Tramp ever speaks is at the end of Modern Times, and it's hilarious. I don't want to give that away because that's not a movie we're supposed to be talking about.
But just to go back to the end scene of the Circus real briefly, him standing in the middle of that empty circle of dirt, like I thought that was a very beautiful kind of final image, and him being alone in the circle, and like how he was alone in a lot of ways, like he was just like, he pushed everyone away from him. He was the clown in the circle, and I don't know, I just like that last shot of the movie.
But it had a weird optimistic, like off to the next adventure kind of walk into the.
Yeah, but that's all his movies. They all end in some sort of like optimism, like look to the stars, Mary.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's what I love. It's one of the. I love him though, Charlie Chaplin. I can't forgive him, and I don't think we should forgive people for the weird stuff they get up to. The fact that he married 2 like 16-year-olds, like that's problematic. But I think you have to separate art from artists, because otherwise everyone is a monster.
Sure,
you get to know them.
Yeah, totally.
All right, I'm moving us into my number 5, which is The Racket by Louis Milestone.
Interesting.
Available on YouTube for free. 84 minutes. Racket this is all of my information, any that I provide to people, by the way, will mostly be from Wikipedia. So
okay,
they're looking to cite my sources.
I'm just it's
American.
all in my head. I know.
Oh, the Wikipedia notes are all in your head.
No, just the knowledge is all in my head from the books that I've read. There's a stack of books right out of shot in my apartment right now.
And at least a couple on the making of the Racket.
Yes. I like the Racket. I mean, I found it to be very confusing, but especially just could have used some sound, this movie. I feel could have used a little bit of talking, I feel, but I found it to be kind of an early noir-y movie that I thought was pretty entertaining.
Thomas Megan playing what's his name, Captain James McQuigg. This feels like an early Jimmy Cagney, or like a just this weird what's his name from the Untouchables,
Capone.
No, he's the cop. So he's the Elliot Ness, I guess.
Elliot Ness, yeah. It's definitely. Well, the whole movie's based on Capone, like it's based on Chicago, the reality in Chicago. I mean, that guy who plays the criminal, Scarsy or whatever his name is.
Yeah, Louis Wolheim as Nick Scarsy.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know where they pulled this guy from, or he just looks like he has this like pug nose. He's like kind of this really pugnacious roughneck character. And I mean, it just feels like it's totally modeled on that. And then the old man, kind of, who's never seen, I believe, this kind of all-powerful old man politician controlling the strings of the crime, is definitely based on a mayor at the time, Big Bill Thompson, who was like this completely corrupt mayor in Capone's pocket, or maybe the other way around. And so like there's definitely some reality in the movie. Yeah. And I couldn't figure out if McQuigg was in on the take or not for many parts. I couldn't get their like him and Scarsy's relationship was very confusing to me, where it was like it seems like they were kind of friendly with each other, but there was definitely obviously a rivalry. And like I couldn't until like I really never came down like, wait, is McQuigg kind of on the take, or is he just kind of, he looks away at the end of the movie? And like I don't know, but I like the kind of like I can't beat crime, and like it's kind of overwhelming. It felt like I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I think you're giving it too much credit that it's that complicated. I do think that the way they introduced these two together is very like were they childhood friends? Like did they go?
Yeah, I know. Right, it's just left out. Like they definitely should have said something like that.
Yeah,
there's like parts of the movie where it's just like I don't know what's going on. I don't know what these relationships are. Yeah. Like the DA comes in. I don't even know. I mean, like, wait, is this the DA? Who is this guy? There's like a lawyer, like a mob lawyer that shows up. But I'm like, is that the mob lawyer, or is that Scarsy's brother? They kind of look the same. They're kind of like this reedy looking mustachioed fellows. There was parts of the movie that I did find confusing. Definitely.
For me, it's just that they're relying too much on stereotypes right from the beginning. I mean, it definitely has like a pulp feel. Like they use the gritty street dialogue when those title cards come up. It's I can see this as I can appreciate it as an early prototype gangster movie. But like there's nothing for me to sink my teeth into. Women come across poorly in this. There's the one female character.
There's only one woman, isn't there?
Yeah, Marie Prevost as Helen Hayes. But I mean, what's his name? Nick Scarsy. He says something along the lines of like, women are they'll bring you to ruin. Or
no, he definitely hates women. Yeah, and that's his downfall, right? Because then again, there's that other confusing scene at the end of the movie where Helen somehow tricks Scarsy into admitting that he killed that cop or something like that. And like, oh, I guess women are his downfall. He's definitely like suspicious. I don't know. He's definitely suspicious of women, and he wants to keep his brother away from women. And
if his brother had listened, then they would have never gotten into that whole problem, and the movie would never have happened. So
again, that was a very confusing
woman.
Yeah, it was confusing. I definitely give you that. It's very confusing, and Like there was that newspaper man who was like, I guess, the romantic lead. He kind of emerged as the romantic lead in the middle of the movie. And I couldn't keep that guy straight. Yeah. I didn't know what that guy was doing or
what was it with the sleepy news reporter too? There's like one news reporter who always
he was a drunk. I feel like he was a drunk. There were two news reporters at the beginning of the movie that I thought were going to be like big parts of the movie, and then they turned out to like they just disappeared at a certain.
They were like comic relief, basically.
Yeah, they kind of and they make fun of the newbie newspaper guy's hat, which I like that scene where they're like, "Oh, nice hat," and he's wearing this very larger than normal fedora, and they're kind of moving on that. That was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. I don't know. I totally get your points, and I found it just as confusing as you did. But I just thought it was kind of like a cool pulpy movie that wasn't too long.
Yeah, wasn't too long. You saw the runtime, and you were just like, "That's it."
I mean, the Circus is an hour, right? Circus is pretty brief too, and as is Chang. Yeah, they're pretty big.
Yeah, we got a couple short ones there in a row.
Oh, I love the short.
This movie was lost. This also was lost for a long time, and they found it in Howard Hughes' personal collection after he passed away.
I read that. That's interesting. Yeah, and then the director of the movie. What is it? What's his name?
Milestone.
Louis Milestone.
Yeah.
He directed The Most Dangerous Game. He directed the Ocean's 11, the one with the Rat Pack. You know, like so he went on and made some interesting movies. I remember I watched. No, did he direct Most Dangerous Game or was that someone else? All Quiet on the Western Front. That's
he wins the I think is that next year? No, 31, the third Oscars. I think that wins. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw that movie. My dad showed me that movie when I was quite young, and I remember liking it. Slash was very bored by it, but you know.
I'm going to see it in 2 months, but I saw the recent All Quiet on the Western Front, and I thought it was okay.
Oh yeah, I didn't see it. I don't care.
It wasn't my pick for Best Picture this year.
No. He also directed Mutiny on the Bounty, apparently, but Marlon Brando took over like the entire process and kind of directed the movie on his own, which he was wont to do. And he was labeled a communist. We talked about that earlier by the House Un-American Service Community. He was labeled a communist, but he wasn't blacklisted. He continued to work, but the work kind of dried up and it wasn't very lucrative or artistically interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Graylisted.
He was graylisted. Is that a real term? Or did you just make that up?
No, I think it is. I mean, I don't know if it's a real term, but I think it's, I read it somewhere where it's just kind of like this idea of like, you still have the stink of being a communist, but they can't really prove anything. So they let you work, but they're not going to give you the good stuff and your career is going to suffer. And then you'll probably drink yourself to death or whatever.
Let's move
on.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Well, let's go. Let's not put these in a definitive order for anyone right now, because I do want to be surprised by what your best picture is at the end. So I'm just gonna finish out the outstanding picture category because we've already talked about Seventh Heaven and The Racket. So why don't we talk about Wings, the other movie that was in that category?
Okay.
And bang that one out. Wings, directed by William A. Wellman, who was a pilot in World War One. Starring Clara Bow. She's got top billing on this as Mary Preston, although she's not in the movie at the time.
Yeah. She's not.
No. Clara Bow, again, you didn't see Babylon. Well, I'm just going to keep asking if you saw Babylon throughout this. She played a character based on Clara Bow in that movie. The woman who plays Harley Quinn. Dang it.
Woman who plays Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
The woman who was in Wolf of
Barbie.
And she's in Barbie. Oh, yeah. I can't think of her name right now. I know you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, and you people at home know who we're talking
about.
Cut
this out, and then I'll look it up. What's her name?
All right, well, we just got the answer. We had to take a break and run to the library. And
I had to check one of my books, and it's Margot Robbie is the actor, of course.
Cyrus, I want to thank you. I'm glad we had you and your extensive book collection.
Don't thank me. Thank my extensive book collection. My EBC.
Yeah, you are always talking about that book collection. You're like, that book collection. And you're like,
getting higher and higher. I'm actually sitting on some of it right now.
yeah. It's impressive. It is impressive.
Thank you.
Buddy Rogers and Richard Arlen play the two pals in Wings. It's basically Top Gun. I mean, the story here, you got the Iceman and Maverick, and they're competing for one woman's affections, although the woman that they're competing for her affection
is gone after 2 minutes of the movie. She never shows up again.
And she's very clear about which one she likes. Like, right.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I like, what is it, David Armstrong? That's the one I like.
I like David. Yes, the rich
David, the rich one. Yeah, there's a rich one, and then is it Jack?
Jack Powell.
Jack Powell, and
he's just the jerk.
Yeah,
he's the poor jerk.
Yeah, he's fixing up a car. He's like an auto mechanic or something like that. But yeah, the whole movie is just a long kind of, it's a war movie, and then he slowly realizes he loves Clara Bow. Yeah.
Well, because he read the note by the end. There's a MacGuffin, I guess, in this movie of a photo of the girl that he thinks that he loves, but the photo is meant for his buddy David Armstrong. She even wrote on the back, "For you," like "love you," something.
Right. Like that. Oh, is that what it was? Because I couldn't figure out what was going on in that scene. I mean, I don't know if you want to discuss it because we're kind of going out of context. That's the end of the movie, but there's the scene where Jack loves Sylvia. Sylvia doesn't love him. She loves David Armstrong, and David and Jack are like best buddies. They're war buddies. And they start out rivals, but then they very quickly become, comrades. And then there's a scene like you referred to at the end of the movie where Jack is like, oh, I'm doing this all for the woman I love. And it's my good luck charm is this locket that my love gave to me. And it's Sylvia. And David's like, oh boy, I love Sylvia. And she loves me. I already know that. So this guy's a fool. And he's being cucked. Yeah. But then the locket falls and breaks or something, and then the photo falls out. But it has, on the photo that Jack had, it has a love message to David, and I couldn't figure out what was going on in that.
Yeah, I guess Jack had never taken it out of the locket, so he never read the back of the...
I feel like they could have thrown in a line of dialogue at the beginning of that movie to kind of seed that, because I could not figure out what was going on in that scene, except that Jack was very mad.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem following it, but I just thought, like, this guy, what a jerk this guy is. Like, because she's basically like, no, it's not. And he's like, I'm taking it. And that's it. I'm going to keep this with me every day while I'm there.
Yeah. And then David had a little teddy bear as a good luck charm, right?
Yeah, he gets he takes the teddy bear. There's a dramatic scene of him at home saying goodbye to his parents. And, again, this is our second movie where a man kisses his mother square on the mouth.
It was a thing. Yeah, I don't know.
Romantic. This movie has I read this after. I didn't realize it even while watching it, but they said it has the first two men kiss at the end, which you can say is brotherly love. The kiss I remember the most is the one to his mother on the lips. I was just like,
I actually do not remember either one of those kisses that you just referred to. I don't even remember them kissing, the two friends kissing at the end.
Oh yeah, he does when he's laying on the table and he's he just shot his buddy down
after Jack murders him.
Yeah, he's hugging them, and I think right before he dies, he gives him a big.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like they're buddies, and then they have this fight, and then there's this misunderstanding in midair, and there's dogfight, and Jack shoots down David and kills him. And everyone's very forgiving of this, I feel like, though I guess it's a understanding because David's in a German plane at the time.
Yeah.
But David can see Jack. He's like waving frantically in the plane, like
he's not shooting.
See your buddy David, and David is just like zoned in, does not see that, and just shoots him down in a bloodthirsty rage.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie. The special effects, I think, are fantastic. They actually shot all of these things in the air.
Yeah.
If you've
On
seen,
location, on actual battlefields too, I believe, right?
yeah, I think they were where some of these things happened is what
Yeah,
it was, like French fields.
sure.
The guy playing Richard Arlen was also a pilot at the time. I think Buddy was the only one. Jack Powell, the main guy, was the only one who hadn't flown a plane before. So they had to teach him to fly a plane because they had to have that camera shooting right at his face.
Actually, the actors really flew the planes then.
Yeah, so those actors were really in the air, which is impressive.
That's
And
great.
they had to film on cloudy days, which if you saw The Aviator, where Howard Hughes was trying to make that Hell's Angel movie in Scorsese's The Aviator, and in Howard Hughes' actual movie Hell's Angels, he's obsessed with filming these dogfights. And the reason why he knew he needed clouds is because Wings had the problem of they shot all these scenes with no clouds and they look not dramatic at all. And you can't tell spatial relations in the air. So they'd have to wait till these cloudy days to get the planes up there and do these complex technical shots of action.
Yeah, those stuff that was really cool. Yeah, that was good. I liked all that. But again, I found it okay. Clara Bow, like you said, was like completely underused and just like I guess comic relief, and like, I like her. She's got in this movie, she's got what my mother-in-law would say. She has hair like Zazu Pitts. She's like, oh, if you're looking disheveled, you're like, oh, you look like Zazu Pitts. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And so I had to look up Zazu Pitts, and she was another kind of silent movie actress who had this crazy hair. So I just kept thinking about Zazu Pitts when I saw Clara Bow in this movie. And I don't know where my mother-in-law got that from, but she says it all the time. And she said, Clara Bow, let me just consult my one of my books.
Yep.
She says, about the movie. She says, Wings is a man's picture and I'm just the whipped cream on top of the pie, which is definitely true. And she was the biggest star in the movie, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, she had just been in this movie called The It Girl a couple years earlier, and that's where
she was defined as the It Girl, right?
She became the It Girl. And she actually, before her in the silent era, like the vamp seductress, like woman with dark black makeup, that was like the big for actresses trying to break in. They were all playing those types of roles. And then Clara Bow comes along and playing this kind of Midwestern tomboy, and that became the next kind of big thing. And now you see a lot of actresses kind of aping that after Clara Bow,
right,
who also had a tragic ending. I think I borrowed one of your books, and I still need to give it back, where I read that Clara Bow she had some woman in charge of her money apparently, and the woman Clara Bow started dating a new guy, and he wanted to fire the woman, and he accused her of stealing money from Clara Bow, and she might have actually been. But there's a big scandalous trial, and this woman ended up writing a tell-all book on Clara Bow, and she wrote all of these horrible things, like that Clara Bow had slept with an entire football team, and people believed it. Sort of like the Richard Gere hamster story. It was like the story everyone just associated with Clara Bow. They were like, she has slept with a football team, and it ruined her career. And like she fought it and tried to say, no, this never happened. But once you say some weird specific lie like that, it's hard to make people not, take the genie out of the bottle. So I think soon, a few years after this, she wasn't acting really in Hollywood very much.
I liked her in the movie. I liked all her. I thought she brought a lot of life to the movie.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice the famous cameo in this movie?
Was it Alfred Hitchcock?
No, good guess, but no. Gary Cooper played Cadet White in the scene. There's a scene where they're both at training camp.
Does he play the guy who immediately is killed?
Yeah, he plays that cool guy who's just like, well, gonna go train.
Yeah, like so weird. That scene is very, very, very funny to me because they're all talking. I didn't know that was Gary Cooper. That's funny. And then he's like, yeah, I don't need a good luck charm. If you die, you die. I'm pretty fatalistic. And then he goes out of the tent, and 2 seconds later, someone comes back. He's like, yeah, he crashed. I'm like, wait, what? What the hell happened? I wasn't even sure if that was like, was he shot down in combat or he just like crashed his plane the minute after he took off?
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like they were at training camp, but maybe I'd have to maybe rewatch.
They were at training camp. So I'm like, how did he die? And why did he die so quickly? It was very funny. That's funny. That's Gary Cooper. I don't think I've seen any Gary Cooper movies. My Gary Cooper reference is Tony Soprano always saying, why aren't men like Gary Cooper anymore?
Mine is from the song Putting on the Ritz, where they mention
Super duper.
I know that. And I'm aware that he is a movie star. But you're right. I can't think of what movie I've seen him in. So.
He was a Western. Did you do Westerns, maybe?
I feel like he did. I feel like he's a romantic lead. I could say that, maybe.
Sure. Well, anyway, he was pretty manly because Tony Soprano loved him. Yeah. So yeah, I thought the movie was exciting, and obviously it was this big production, and it felt like a Best Picture movie. Like it felt like almost like you said, like a modern Best Picture movie. It's full of action. It's got this kind of love triangle going on. It's got drama, and yeah, it's definitely, I could see it. And then it has that, we didn't even talk about, I mean, it has that shot, which is, I feel like it's actual legacy, where they had the cinematographer, what's his name? Let me look at my books. Harry Perry. He set up this machine that was like hung, kind of like a camera, and it was like a track that. So the tracking shot is, we should probably describe that, is the dolly shot, is it's in this kind of Moulin Rouge like venue where everyone's partying and drinking champagne, and all the soldiers are on leave, and it's like this real jazzy atmosphere, and the camera goes down this series of tables right down the middle of the tables, and there are all these actors on either side of it, and they're all kind of chatting and laughing and drinking. Meanwhile, the camera very steadily pushes in all the way to the end of the series of tables where Jack is sitting drunk out of his mind, and it's really, really impressive, and it's really had to be, I imagine, very hard to shoot, hard to choreograph.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool shot. But again, you could take it for granted because you're like, yeah, they do that all the time now.
Yeah, but the actors had to like they must have run that a ton of times to get that just perfectly right. But I think that scene then gets, I don't want to say upstaged, but by that whole cartoon bubbles thing, which ran for like the next 10 minutes of the
they really, like, he was so drunk that he was seeing bubbles everywhere, and there's this scene where he's shaking bubbles out of women, and he's like, oh, what about you? Do you have a lot of bubbles in you? And the woman's like, don't shake me, I don't have any bubbles. And he's like, what about you? And he grabs Clara Bow and he starts shaking bubbles out of her, and she loves it or something. And shake her till she likes it is the philosophy there. But yeah, there is that weird animated bubbles scene that does go on for a really long period of time.
I didn't find much on like what inspired them to do that. Like, so I'm thinking animation at the time, one of the things in doing research for this video was like I was thinking Walt Disney, he's going to be one of the biggest Academy Award winners of mostly for shorts going forward and special awards. But Steamboat Willie had just come out at some point. I don't know if it came out after this movie though, because I'm wondering what makes you, while you're making Wings, decide, hey, let's have cartoon bubbles appear. Like, we'll draw them right on the film. Like, it just seems like a weird, where did that come from? Like, I didn't read it.
I think the whole thing was like supposed to be like a comedic kind of intermission between like all the serious war stuff. And like, I don't know what the idea came from. I thought it was kind of interesting, but it did go on too long.
It went on forever. It's like they realized, oh, we can do this and it'll look kind of cool. And then they were like, well, let's just do it.
Do it and do it and do it and do it. And it just doesn't escalate. And then he goes back to his room drunkenly with Clara Bow, and she's like trying to, express her affection for him, but he's too drunk. And that leads to this other part of the movie, which is kind of groundbreaking. There's nudity in this movie. Like, Clara Bow is kind of a little bit naked in the movie very briefly. And I don't know, is that the first time there was nudity in a movie? Or
I read that it was one of the first widely released films to show nudity. I didn't even catch it again on first viewing. I saw a still afterwards where you can totally see.
oh, I bet you saw us. I know how you saw us.
Well, I'm like, I don't remember this at all. I'm like, where do you, if you're a silent viewer at the time, that
Silent.
watching this in the theater, if you're in the theater and you're watching this movie back in 1927, 28, whatever, I don't know that you would know, okay, I saw her boob, like you know she's undressing, and that in and of itself is
Yeah, saucy.
yeah, saucy. But yeah, I don't know that the nudity. I wonder if that was an intentional thing they put in the movie, or if they just didn't,
Well, I think it was intentional. I think they put it in the movie, and like this is pre-Hays Code, so I guess they could get away with it. So, yeah, and the fact that it was Clara Bow, who was like, a huge star at the time, it must have been like, all the gentlemen in the audience, and must have been pretty thrilled by that.
I think she had done like nude photography too. I think she was kind of like a person who was very comfortable to do nudity, like was had no qualms about it.
Yeah,
At least in the early stage before her reputation was slandered.
yeah. It was yeah. So anyway, those are kind of like two big things. I think those are the two. I mean, that dolly shot, I see that
Yeah.
all the time, and I see it kind of like talked about. And then when it came up in the movie, I'm like, oh, that's from this movie. I didn't know that. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I've seen it. I saw it on TikTok, I think, at one point, because people will just post random, like, they'll post, hey, is Buster Keaton doing something crazy? And then they post that shot,
Okay.
and then you see, so I'd seen that shot before, but yeah, it is. It's really a breathtakingly good shot. So
Yeah, no, it's the highlight of the movie for me.
yeah.
But it's an okay movie.
One stunt person died making this movie, and another one pilot broke his neck after he had to crash the plane multiple times. All of these crashes and things really are happening in the movie. That's the other. There's no special effects. These aren't miniatures. Like every plane in this is actually being crashed into something, and that I don't know. I guess it makes it look good.
Yeah, they didn't have any regulations as far as that is concerned. It's just like, you may die, and that was just part of I don't know, part of the process of making movies back then. They didn't have any regard for animals and stunt people. And even putting those real actors up in planes, that would, I mean, other than Tom Cruise, that would like never happen. Like that. It's just like, the insurance would be crazy now. You wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, that Jack Powell, Buddy Rogers kid who'd never been in a plane. I heard that he like almost he threw up after every take. Like he was like violently ill during all of the filming for this.
Man, that is insane.
Moving on to
what's next, Kenneth?
Let's hit, you know what? Let's do King Vidor's The Crowd from 1928, 89 minutes, starring Eleanor Boardman as Mary Sims and James Murray as John Sims.
Did you notice how many women are called Mary in these movies? There's like
John's pretty
4
common.
or 5 movies where the female lead is Mary, and there's a couple of Jacks too. Like it's just like they just went with the meat and potatoes names, like Mary, Jack, John. Like
this guy's a little foreign, Chico.
Yeah, Chico. Yeah, famously French name.
Yeah, yeah. So The Crowd by King Vidor. This one to me is very interesting because this movie has never received a DVD release, never received a Blu-ray release. I don't even think it's gotten a VHS release. And it was nominated for Best Unique and Artistic Picture. And let me spoil something for people.
It lost to, what did it lose to? Sunrise?
Sunrise. And let me so when they picked Best Pictures in 1929, it was left to the 5 heads of those departments, of the actors, directors, writers, technicians, and I'm missing one. Those 5 the 5 heads, elected people from those departments, would pick the best picture. And what would happen is, because the first year is Louis B. Mayer kind of supervised. So they picked for best artistic picture the crowd to win. They chose the crowd. Louis B. Mayer, who his company put the crowd out, MGM, said no. He did not want the crowd to win best picture. He wanted to give it to one of the other studios in a show of politics that they're all inclusive. And he also didn't like the crowd because of the negative ending, but that's a different story. So Louis B. Mayer came in, kept these guys up all night, and wouldn't let them leave until they agreed that Sunrise was the best unique and artistic picture. And they finally relented, and Sunrise got that Oscar. And the thing that is interesting about the politics of that is that Sunrise is available over my shoulder on Blu-ray. It was the first silent movie released on Blu-ray. It has great commentary. It has all sorts of special features. It's been restored. It looks beautiful. Meanwhile, The Crowd, the movie that should have won, never been restored, only available through the Internet Archive. No other way to watch it.
That's a shame.
I agree.
I'm really surprised that this doesn't get some sort of Criterion thing, but
yeah, anything. Like at this point, anything. Put it on a VHS.
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't think they're going to do that, Ken.
Yeah, they won't do that. But
yeah, so you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I thought this movie was for me. Watching the first half of this movie, I was very I was almost ready to turn it off, because you're following this guy, Jack Sims.
Other Jack.
Or John Sims.
Johnny Sims, yeah.
Johnny Sims. And he's just like, everything's like, he's told from being young that he's going to have this he's going to be somebody.
Well, he tells himself that.
Well, his father says that when he's born. He's like, oh, he's really going to be somebody.
Yeah, right. I guess so. Yeah.
But it's almost like, he's got this arrogance to him, and the movie continues on, and he just kind of lucks into these situations where you're like not on his side. I don't feel like I'm on his side till that point. And then somewhere in the middle, things start to turn, and it becomes like this other movie. It's not like this hero's journey in New York. It becomes like your journey, the real man's journey in New York. And like, it has this very tragic ending.
Yeah, common people in a collective struggle was like definitely a theme in this movie. And I actually think you're not supposed to like Johnny Sims. I actually feel like the movie definitely has this kind of, it sets Johnny up to be like the bad guy, where at the beginning of the movie, like you said, he like meets this lady and they have this very weird date where they're driving around on a bus and making fun of, that's it. So they drive on a bus and they see a clown on the street, and he's like laughing at the clown. He's like, that guy's a loser. Not like me. I'm a winner. And then at the end of the movie, he becomes that clown. He becomes that juggling street clown. And like the fact that it's seeded in the beginning of the movie, like it just indicates that they know where this. You're not really supposed to side with them. And then immediately after they get married, who's the woman? Is it Mary? Johnny and Mary?
It's Mary, yeah.
He becomes like this petulant jerk, like immediately. Like it's just, and I think after that point, maybe that's the point you're talking about, it really starts like loving it. The movie like humiliates Johnny like over and over again. And Mary's very patient in the style of women act like characters in the day. Like she's just like, she's sick of him, but then he like says, he gives her some flowers or some crap, and she's like, "Oh, Johnny, you do love me after all," and like mushing faces next into each other. But I just definitely felt like it was definitely a very subtle movie for the times. And
absolutely. And it also felt very ahead of its time, just in that it was like this very existential. Here, look at people that was you don't expect from movies, because it's not glamorous and it's not this high romance. They said
it's definitely not.
It's none of these things. And reading a little bit on the backstory of this, like King Vito had just made a really popular movie, war movie, and he was basically given like carte blanche, do whatever you want to do.
tell. You can
That was this
absolutely
movie.
tell that he was just like given full reign, because there's like amazing sequences in this movie that are just great, and the sets are just amazing.
Hey, this is Kenny from the editing booth one more time, and I just wanted to say that the movie King Vidor did before this was called The Big Parade. We just showed a picture of it on the YouTube channel. So this is for our podcast listeners. And I also wanted to take the time here to mention that Louis B. Mayer referred to this movie, The Crowd, as the toilet movie because it was one of the first movies to show an actual toilet in it. Just another indignity this movie suffered at the hands of Louis B. Mayer. And now back to the show. Yeah, that shot at the beginning of the going up the first of all, the shots of New York, like I wrote in my notes at the beginning, I'm just like, just these early shots of just New York City, like at the time, is just like amazing to watch the movie just to see that, and to see what the streets looked like. And then that one shot going up the building and then focusing on the room. And then it's just like a bunch of tables of workers in the room. And he's just one of them.
Yeah.
Like that whole sequence I thought was great.
Yeah, that room is very Kafkaesque. It reminded me of a shot in The Trial where there's a similar kind of shot of, faceless workers in a I think it's in The Trial. Anyway, it's definitely like it hits home where it's just like the crowd, like that's the theme of the movie. Like you're either with the crowd and you're flowing with the crowd, or the minute you come the minute you step out of step with the crowd, then you're lost. And like there's this title card that says, hold on, let me just look at one of my books. I have to turn a page. Man, I just love the smell of these old books. The crowd laughs with you always, but will cry for you for only a day. And like,
yeah,
I think that's very thematic, especially considering the last shot of the movie where it's just it's so simple, like this shot, and they're just, Mary and Johnny are in the audience, and there's this comedy and like this pull out shot of like the crowd just laughing in unison. And he's become part of the crowd again, and it's like laughing with you, and it's like this joyous part of which I don't. You said the movie had a negative ending. Like I feel like it was a very, I mean, it was an interesting, and I think it had a kind of this optimistic ending where the crowd can bring you great joy, but it can also you can also feel lost in it and isolated within it. So I definitely.
Well, I think the movie doesn't leave it clear that they're like that he's back together with her.
No, you're right. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I got these tickets, can we just at least do this? And then, maybe you can.
She's right. She's about to leave him, right?
She's about to leave.
A vacuum clean. Yeah, because he's a clown. He comes in and it's so funny where he's like, oh, I just got this job as a juggling street clown. It's great. I'm selling it's an advertisement for a restaurant. And then he like, oh, look at the handful of change I made. And she's like, now you're not gonna leave me, right? And she's like, yeah, I'm still gonna leave you. And then he's like, oh, but what about these movie tickets? And she's like, okay.
It's like, and there's so many great moments of just like ordinary life, sort of them getting their first apartment and the fights they start to get into, and them, what it's like being in these, this isn't a glamorous Hollywood apartment set in New York. They're in like this tiny little thing with the L train right outside the window.
Yeah, the train, which is a really cool thing, and like
the bed that they got to put into the wall.
Yeah, I like there's a scene where they're getting into some argument, and then the train goes by, and he has to stop talking because the train is going by. And obviously, it's a silent movie, but you kind of can read that whole thing, and it's just like it's so well done. And yeah. And then there's this weird thing where he wants to be an ad man, and he makes that it's such a great little part of the movie where you kind of forget about it. Like in the middle of the movie, he writes this ad where apparently he gets $500 for writing this ad for like this cleaning supply thing. And it's just like sleight of hand magic cleaner. I don't even know what he wrote. Like, it's just like he wrote this ad and he wins $500. And then for some reason, he doesn't follow up on that. He doesn't do more ads. But then at the end of the movie, when they're sitting in the movie theater, Mary like looks at the paper and says like, "Oh, look, it's your ad." And he gets all happy about it. And he shows it to the guy next to him and said, "This is my ad." The guy was way more interested than I would be. But I just found that little moment to be really, really well done. And
yeah, I think the scene at the beach with the two kids, that felt really, that felt like it's not a Mad Men, like you could see where he's going to take the kid to pee. He's trying to play the ukulele.
Yeah, that ukulele scene. Yeah.
And he's like the kid and the wife's trying to cook on the beach, which is that she was in over her head before she started there because she's trying to make like bacon and coffee like on the beach, on a crowded beach.
Yeah.
And she had like a cake just sitting in the sand, like a chocolate cake. And the boy ends up kicking sand up into.
Bring a chocolate cake to the beach, Mary.
But even just like the kids running around, like it just felt so like almost like a documentary in some ways. Like he's like drawing from real memories and making this movie. So you get the sense like, yeah, this is a guy's vision, like an auteur director's vision, not just a standard studio script. And I thought that was all very surprising to me when I suddenly started connecting with the movie about midway through.
Yeah. I like that scene because he's being very annoying with that ukulele, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad this is there has no sound in this picture because it sounds awful. And then it turns out that his wife is also annoyed by this thing. She's just like, will you stop playing that crazy ukulele? There's another scene in the movie where they have a couple of kids, right? They're in the midst of a huge fight because he won't take a job from his in-laws because he's too proud, and they have this big fight, and he's like a total jerk. And then she's like, "Oh, I'm pregnant," and then he's like, "Okay, I love you now because you're pregnant," And then they have a kid, and then they have another kid. I guess there's like a time jump.
Yep.
The youngest daughter. The day he wins the $500, and then they're so happy, the youngest daughter gets hit by a car and killed. And then they do this effect where it's like, they have, I don't even know how they did it. It's like this kind of, the kid is like superimposed on the screen so they can show the car running over her without actually running over the little girl. It's very, I don't know if you've watched Quantum Leap a lot, but it's a very like Al from Quantum Leap effect when they used to like walk through, a pool table or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I didn't, so I don't know that, but
yeah, well, it's your listeners and watchers who have seen Quantum Leap will go, oh yeah,
really,
it's like Quantum Leap a little bit. But yeah, anyway, that effect was really cool. And there was a lot of really great effects, like these montages and swirling kind of like nightmares of the city. And like yeah.
So apparently this guy, James Murray, who played the John Sims, had a tragic life story as well. He was a drunk in real life. He had tried to be in a bunch of other movies and he kept getting fired. And then finally, at one point, King Vidor wanted him to be in a sequel to this. They were going to make a sequel to The Crowd called Our Daily Bread, where John and Mary moved to a farm, and it was going to be about them trying to be farmers, I think. And he found Murray on the street. He was panhandling for change. He was like a Skid Row bum. And the
star of this movie, he was
this movie, yeah.
As a panhandler?
Yeah, and he was like, I don't need your handouts, or at least according to one of the stories. And so he wouldn't do it. And then like a year or two later, he died trying to get money off of people on the down by the docks and doing this trick where he pretends to fall into the river, except he actually fell into the river and he drowned.
Wow. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's totally nuts.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, he was good in the movie. I found him annoying, and which I think he's supposed to be. I think he's pretty obnoxious. What? Go ahead.
I think you're right on that. I think he is, because I think they want you to find him annoying, and then it gives the story more power later on because they're presenting him as like good as the hero, but something about him is just you want to punch him or something. The first half of the movie.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the movie, and it's like kind of like a little bit of a mini theme, is like he has this like he can't wash his face without someone like commenting on it, and he's like he's this really aggressive face washer. And there's this scene where like he's just washing his face after work or something, and all his coworkers are going by like, "What are you washing your face, Sims? Or washing him up? Scrub your face, Sims!" And he keeps getting really mad. And then it happens again later when he's trying to wash his face on his honeymoon or something, and he's washing his face, and people are like giving him the side eye. I just found that to be a very amusing part of the movie where he couldn't wash his face in peace.
I think that first scene was meant to show how, like, you know, kind of when you start melt into a job, when you start doing it all the time, like there's little sayings at the job that people just do.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, sure.
You know,
and all that. Yeah, that's a good point.
And maybe pretty soon he would be doing that to the next new guy. Like, hey, wash his face, you know.
It just feels like this movie is operating at a level way beyond 1929. And it's just like, it's got this subtlety in the movie that I did not see in any other movie that we watched.
Yeah, it's I really liked, I do want to stress, I really liked Eleanor Boardman, the girl playing Mary Sims too. Like she had this very natural style that again felt modern, like not overacting. She felt very, you know, sympathetic and realistic. I really enjoyed every scene the two of these were in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was pissed in the scene where he's yelling at her, where they get in that big fight before she calls him back to be pregnant. I think that's where I realized I liked this movie. I was like, he's screaming, he's being such a jerk to her about everything, and he's just like,
yeah, he's like, why don't you tell me when the milk is full or something? Yeah. And he's so mad about everything.
He's like, marriage isn't a word, it's a sentence. And then he slams the door and leaves. And you know, and then she has this moment of like panic of being like, she's wants to leave, but then she doesn't know what to do. And then she decides, oh, I got to tell him I'm pregnant. And at first I'm like, is she making this up? But I think realizing how emotionally I was getting involved in the characters at that point, because I'm like, leave them, just go, just get the hell away. This guy sucks.
Totally. Yeah.
Like I was already wrapped into, I didn't know it, but I'm wrapped into the movie now. Now I'm like, I need to see, you know, how these two are gonna make out at the end. Yeah. And you know, he attempts to kill himself in front of his child. He throws the ball down the docks. That scene, he's gonna just throw himself in front of a train. And that was another sentimental scene where the kid is like I still believe in you, Pop.
Yeah, that scene where he's like wandering around drunk, but also somehow his son is there too.
Yeah, he took him with him.
He's like, oh, Pop, I want to be just like you. I'm like, what are you talking about, kid? He's like at his nadir, you know, he's just like, he's losing it, and the kid still has faith in him, and that faith kind of gives him a little boost and allows him the confidence to become a juggling street clown.
And when he goes to become a juggling clown, he leaves his son sitting on a bench in a cemetery. Like he's like, hey, you sit here. Like I'll be working over here.
Interesting, it's staged in a cemetery a little bit too. Like obviously there's some sort of subtext there, maybe.
Yeah, again, maybe, probably. I mean, like you said, it is operating on different levels.
I found it to be funny too. Like there's this great, very funny scene where he's meeting his in-laws for the first time, and they hate him, and because he's like, they can smell a loser, you know.
Yeah.
And Mary says like, she's trying to keep the conversation going, and she's like, Johnny knows a trick. Come on, let's do a trick, Johnny. And Johnny's like, well, I don't want to do this trick right now. And he's like, no, do it. So he does this trick where he's like, he takes his wrist and like pretend like he can twist it all the way around or something like that. And he kind of like does this, like that's his trick. And it just cuts to the in-laws, and they're just like completely deadpan, just like staring at him. And it's like this long sequence of him bending his wrist. I found it super funny. Yeah. And just to go back to the directing, like there's a few scenes in this movie where he just lets the camera like linger on these actors, and it lingers on his uncomfortable awkwardness in that scene. Or there's a scene where Mary, it lingers on Mary. Is it like maybe after she leaves him? Oh, that is it. Like where she leaves him, and they give her like this long shot of her kind of kind of going through this like series of emotions from like anger to sadness to like really big despair and to like realization, and then she runs to the it's just like this very long shot that's just her, and maybe it's common for the day, but like it just feels like really really well done, and she's great, and she's just great in that scene.
Yeah, the stuff at Niagara Falls too just felt like you're actually watching somebody's vacation, like honeymoon footage. Like that stuff was all great. There's just a lot of surprising things in this movie. Of course, King Vidor ends up marrying Eleanor Boardman, who played Mary, or they were married beforehand. I'm not positive, but they were married.
Okay.
So, all right, I think.
All right, you want to move on?
Let's move on to Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, won the Academy Award for Unique and Artistic Picture under dubious situation, as I described earlier. Directed by F.W. Murnau.
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu. If anyone has seen a silent film movie, I feel like that's probably the one.
Yeah, definitely.
That you viewers out there who have, if you've ever watched silent films, that's got to be in the top 2 or 3, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
What else would you even? Maybe Metropolis.
Metropolis. Yeah.
Nosferatu. That's it. That's
maybe some Charlie Chaplin thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, or yeah, if you're on TikTok, you've seen a bunch of bits from Buster Keaton and stuff. But so Janet Gaynor plays the wife again. We saw her in Seventh Heaven. We know she won Best Actress.
Yep.
The cinematographer. There were 2 cinematographers in this movie: Charles Rosher and Carl Strauss. They both won Academy Awards for cinematography for this movie. 5 Oscar nominations, 4 wins.
Yeah. I mean, it's Murnau's first American movie, right?
First American movie. They brought him over here. He's very popular. They started doing this with, they end up doing this with Alfred Hitchcock by 1940. Start exporting these people, talented directors over. I think the studios realized kind of early on that directors, it was important to have good directors, like to have big name directors. That was maybe more important than the star. Well, the stars were important, but having the big name director was a thing. Probably earlier than most people recognize.
Yeah, and you can definitely see like the echoes, if again I may use that word, from Nosferatu, which is the only Murnau movie I've seen other than this one.
Yeah.
In this movie, like there's like the use of shadow and the use of mostly the use of shadow and light, and there was the classic Murnau touch. Okay, so at the start of the movie, there's the guy. I don't know who's he played by.
Oh yeah, did I get into that? No, the actor's played by George O'Brien, playing the man.
Yeah, right. They don't have names, right?
Yeah, they're supposed to be stand-ins, like everyman, I guess, or stand-in.
Well, I don't want to stand in for this guy because he's a maniac. But so he starts the movie and he's really furious that he's in a relationship with this woman.
Mm-hmm.
I thought was his wife at the beginning of the movie, but apparently he's not.
No, that is his wife.
That is his wife? Okay. So he's not happy with his wife, who is probably 22, but looks like 58 years. They styled her in a way that she looks like, someone from Little House on the Prairie. They gave her this like kind of like mother from Psycho kind of like
that's a good description, actually.
A tied back hair and this kind of roughly dressed, and so he's furious about it with her. He wants to be with this his mistress, this again
woman from the city.
Woman, right? There's this whole thing about a lot of these movies. There's this thing about the people from the city versus people from the town, and like what that represents, And so she's from the city, and she's his mistress, and they come up with her and the man come up with this plan to murder his wife, and then they can sell the farm and move to the city. And so the man and their plan is, okay, we're going to row out. You're going to take your wife out on this boat, and then you're going to drown her and then tip the boat over, and then you're going to float to safety on this bundle of reeds. Your point, and so he's on this lake and he just looks like a murderer. Like she's like, even the whole time when they're on this date, he's just like furious and is like looking down, and then he's on the boat and he's furiously rowing, and his wife is like having a good time at first, but then she's like, well, he's behaving really strange. And then he stands up in the boat and like advances on her like a crazy person, just like he's got like the Stanley Kubrick look on his face, like the head down, eyes up kind of look. And then he stops, he gets a change of heart. And then she, apologizes to her. And then there's this long sequence of him following all over the town, kind of apologizing. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought about murdering.
It's tough to get over.
Yeah, and it's very tough to get. I would think that would be like a big sticking point in a relationship where you clearly tried to
bring it up constantly. Like I know I would, every little fight you'd be like, well, you tried to murder me once.
And then there's a scene where he gives her a plate of sandwiches and he's like, what about now? Are you happy now? You got all these sandwiches. And she doesn't actually forgive him until they go into a church and they see a wedding ceremony taking place, and they're kind of moved by that expression of, pure love or whatever. And then they get back together. Well,
he says something, the priest says something kind of creepy, like she is a, innocent, she's unworldly girl and you need to protect her, kind of a thing. And then that makes him realize like, oh, wow, I almost killed my wife. That's the opposite of what the priest is saying. And then he breaks out crying in her lap.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Is this the movie with the sequence where they're in the city, right? And then they make up, right at that point, they kiss, and then they kind of walk into the distance, and they're like the rural woods are kind of superimposed, and that becomes the city. They're walking through the woods, and then it's just a fantasy, and it cuts back to the city where they're holding up traffic with their.
They're walking and cars are going around them.
Yeah, that's this movie, right?
Yeah, that's this movie. I thought that was great. Really cool. That looked awesome. Yeah. He was a master of montage. The German expressionism. Like that was that was in his wheelhouse. A tool he uses a lot in this movie. The scene where that she's describing the woman from the city is describing you're going to come to the city, and it cuts to all these shots of the city and bands playing, and then she's dancing like wildly, like in the swamp over it. Like that's all.
Yeah.
This is like a vampire movie, but there's no vampire. Like and then I was wondering, when did Frankenstein, so this is like a prototype, because he's a lot like Frankenstein.
Who is?
Mike O'Brien, our lead, the man, like the way he moves, like
you mean Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, like Frankenstein's monster, like the way he moves. He had lead put into his shoes, I read, so that because Murnau wanted his walk to be this menacing, slow walk,
wow,
which is very much like Frankenstein with the lead boots and the that kind of stilted pacing, and then this thing with the hands
Frankenstein
up.
Is 1931.
31. So this is you almost wonder, like, is there any kind of a connection? Is it the book was out way before then? But
Frankenstein in the book is very different than Frankenstein in the movie.
So maybe Frankenstein the movie, had some of this. They saw some of this and were like, well, because he is very imposing, and the whole first part of the movie up until he goes to kill her is so suspenseful. Like you're like, oh my God, this guy is gonna murder his wife. Yeah. And the music is so it's very suspenseful.
Yeah, again, he doesn't deserve this woman at all, but the movie gives her, she really has the wife really has no agency at all. She's either, she's either being actively trying to murder her, or he's being rude to her, or he's like, he gives her the smallest token and she just like falls all over him, and then they this is the part where I thought they were getting married, because then they go to this photographer and they have all these photos taken. And I'm like, oh, are these wedding photos?
They're play acting. They're play acting like they just got remarried. Like this is.
I see. It's kind of renewing of vows. I didn't get that at all. But then there's that scene, which is very long. I
liked that scene. I thought that scene was hilarious with where they think they broke the statue and they do.
It's a weird little comic interlude where they broke the statue. they broke this photographer's like Grecan statue of a woman or something, and the head falls off, and then
he puts like a fruit on it or
it's
something.
like
Fruit
he
has
puts
the
a little
pig.
squeeze ball head on it, and that's the end of the scene.
Then they
And
run
then,
up.
and then there's another scene right after that where they go to the circus or something like that. Do they go to the circus?
Before you go walk totally away from the fruit statue scene?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have to mention that the music that they play over that scene is Funeral March for a Marionette, which is the music Alfred Hitchcock would later use for Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Dun, 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 dun. And you know he saw Sunrise and probably loved Murnau was one of his heroes.
Yeah, one of his idols, sure.
So for sure that stuck in his head, this scene when he was doing that. But continue. So yeah, they go to this crazy circus.
And then they're having a good time, but then a pig gets away, and there's this long sequence of a pig getting away. And there's a very long shot of a pig drinking wine. And it just seems to be like a kind of a palate cleanser a little bit after all the murder, the first half of the movie, which is very dark.
Yeah.
The second half of the movie is very nice. Another question I had, okay, so they make up, right? And they have this nice date at the circus where they chase a pig around or whatever. And then, what's his name? Johnny?
No, it's the man.
He says, "Oh, why don't we take a boat home?" And the woman's like, his wife is like, "Yeah, sure." Like, she wants to get on a boat already with this guy. Like, he already tried to murder her. And then they're on this very long boat ride where she's happy, but then she falls asleep. It's very long, and then they get caught in a big storm.
And then basically the plot from the beginning, which was take her out to sea, drown her, and then float back in on the reeds. Is that what the reeds, I guess?
Yeah, I guess that's why he needs to float back on the reeds. Yeah, the reed saves her.
They end up saving her. So they end up coming back into play for the end of the movie. But the woman from the city thinks, oh, he went through with the plan and he's pulling it off believably.
Yeah. She thinks, oh yeah, great, our plan worked. And then she goes to the house to kind of hook up with the man, and the man like starts throttling. See, he like starts choking her, and like he has to be pulled off her.
Choking's his main
that's his main kind of response to a lot of things.
Well, they have that weird scene early on in the where there's a man hitting on his wife in the barbershop, and while he's getting a hot shave.
Yeah, that's a very weird scene.
And then it ends with this menacing, like he pulls a knife out, like he's
a knife out of nowhere, and then he like basically almost stabs the guy. Never referenced again. I mean, I guess it's like part of his character, but again,
he almost murders people.
Yeah, part of you mean like he literally almost stabs this guy for like really almost. I mean, he's like hitting on his wife, I guess, but
he was being aggressive with his hitting on.
It's never referenced again. And I feel like you're supposed to like this guy, at least, you're supposed to want them to be together.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want them to be together. I feel like that's a bad move for the woman.
Yeah, it's hard to get over almost being murdered. How do you trust him?
And on top of it, he's like a dick. He's cheating on her also on top of murdering.
And it's an open secret because people in town
everybody knows. Like the wife knows at the beginning of the movie that he's going off to see his mistress, and she's like, oh, it used to be so great at the beginning of our marriage when he didn't cheat on me.
I think the thing with this movie is you got to look beyond the story a little bit, because I think this movie is all in. Every shot, everything you look at in this movie is curated in such an interesting way. Like the shadows, the sets, like the village that they're in, the rooms and all the weird forced perspectives in there, just in the room where she's making the soup at the beginning, like the table's all kind of large in the foreground. There's nothing on the walls in the background. it's just everything's meant to draw your eye in particular directions, and it feels very like a dream kind of it's all mood, really, right? This movie.
Yeah.
If you lock in on that story, yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Sunrise,
yeah.
a song of two humans, but it's not. Yeah, they're not stand-ins for you and I, because we're not almost ready to murder someone constantly.
That title, I mean, a song of two humans. That seems very
Yeah.
pretentious. But yeah, and then at the end, the wife finally lets her hair down, and we realize that, how beautiful she is, I guess. And he's like, "Oh, the sun is coming up," and I mean, he's just gonna cheat on her again, though. I mean,
Yeah, 4 years later, the tourists come every season, I guess, is what they said at the beginning of the movie.
right, from the city again, that
city.
corrupting city. The city corrupts.
Yeah.
The town or the village is the pure goodness.
Yeah, I think this movie, just in looks, it feels like an artistic achievement, and I'm sure there's a lot of shots I'm not even thinking about right now that I should.
Yeah, no. I can just think of that scene when he's on the boat and advancing on her. That's a really
it was
yeah, it was an interesting movie, and despite the kind of whatever kind of problematic relationship, I found it to be interesting.
All right, are you glad you watched all these movies? I'm going to send us back to not sharing screen. Hey, we're back, everybody. Welcome to the end of Golden Boy. We're a lot sweatier. It's very hot where I am.
Did we not record any of that we just talked about? Did we?
No, we did. Just if you were our YouTube viewers, you were looking at images of posters and other fun things.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if you are our podcast listener, then you're just like, but yeah, you're just still talking. You're just still talking.
Yeah. So yes, I am, to answer your question, I am basically glad that you strong-armed me into watching these movies, and basically took my casual mention that I'd like to be on this show as a serious thing, and made me your first guest. And I did enjoy. I kind of went into it like homework a little bit, but I did end up really enjoying the process.
Yeah. No, me too. I think there's just, the more you go into this, and if you just do this on your own and you're just like, I'm going to watch old movies, you're watching an old movie at home, and then you're not going to go to work and start telling people, hey, I watched Sunrise, Song of Two Humans. People are going to be like, what? No one cares. So I like the idea of doing this. And then for me, listening to other podcasters and seeing the excitement of other people into these movies and genre, and because I'll stay following them as well. I just think, this isn't for everybody. I don't think everyone's going to want to go back and watch these 8 movies. And I think at the end of these 8, how many would you even recommend to a casual person?
A casual person?
Yeah, if you're at a bar and someone's like, "Oh yeah, you watched all those Oscar movies. Any of those worth watching?" What
kind of bar? What? Who's asking?
Oh yeah, I forgot. Since you stopped smoking your pipe and drinking, you don't go to the bar.
I don't associate.
You're in the library and you're.
Oh, I'm in the library. Okay, and I'm being in the library. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, you're in the library and
drunk in the stacks, and someone comes up to me, and I'm like, "You haven't watched all the movies from 1929?" Well, okay, I would recommend. Yeah, I'd say 3.
Yeah. All right, I'm probably pretty close. I'm probably at maybe 4.
Yeah.
All right. All right, everybody, we are at the end. So those of you who skipped to the end and wanted to know the results, we're here. We're doing it. Woo. So since this is a unique Oscars 1929, and we're dealing with 2 different categories, let me start by asking you, best outstanding movie between The Wings, Racket, and Seventh Heaven, who gets the Golden Boy? Just those 3 movies.
I'd give it to Wings.
I would also give it to Wings.
Right.
Best unique and artistic movie between Sunrise, The Crowd, and Chang. Who wins the Golden Boy?
Chang. No, I'm just kidding. It's the crowd.
That would be shocking.
No, it's the crowd.
It's the crowd. All right. So now we're between, and I agree with you on that one as well. I think the crowd got ripped off by Sunrise in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. So we are about to reveal the first 1929 Academy Awards. And the best picture goes to, hold it up and reveal.
Look at that. The crowd.
And the first ever Golden Boy for Best Picture goes to The Crowd by King Vidor, a Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer picture starring James Murray and Eleanor Boardman. Suck it, Louis B. Your toilet movie is the best picture of 1929. The Crowd.
That's the movie head and shoulders above every other movie.
I totally agree. I think that movie, especially the fact that it's unable to be watched, like the two facts. The one that Louis B. Mayer stepped in, put his thumb on it, and stole the unique picture from it. And second, that's just not available anywhere, and that
I'm really, like I said, there should be a criterion for this. Did they do that for any of King Vidor's other movies?
No, King Vidor is like, this guy is, I had no idea. I thought he was a king. I'm watching the movie. I'm like, is this guy like a king of another country or something? Like, what a weird name. His actual first name is King.
Yeah.
But I bought this book on The Crowd, which you can see up above me, just because it's literally like the only source of information. Like, let me bring her down for the people at home to see. King Vidor's The Crowd, the making of a silent classic.
Yeah, so, but it's not. It's not seen as a classic. It's a completely.
It's seen as a classic by the niche of people who love silent film, like the people who are like experts in this area. You know, this is what I've learned. Like, people will say The Crowd it's a movie that should be brought back, and it is criminal that it hasn't been at this point.
Yeah.
When considering, I mean, it makes sense why Charlie Chaplin would be. Charlie Chaplin was those were the two movies for me that I was juggling.
Okay.
I felt like I love the Gold Rush. And what's funny is when they had the original 1929 Oscars and people were writing in what movies should get nominated, they were taking questions from people. I don't know if it's just from the 36, but they were submitting the Gold Rush to be nominated. That movie came out in 1925 because they didn't understand. No, it's just going to be like the last year, like not just any movie you can think of gets nominated.
Well, wasn't this 29 ceremony for 1927 and 1928 though? It was for two. It was
August 1st, 1927 until the last day of July, 1928.
Okay.
And then those were the movies that were nominated. And I think, you know, the politician in me would be like, you know, because maybe this is one of Charlie Chaplin's last shots, I would be like, the Circus deserves the award. It's a silent era film that if I were going to recommend to a coworker, you don't have to know anything going into that. I think recommending The Crowd to a coworker, you know, Crowd is, it's like you don't always recommend maybe a David Lynch movie. I love David Lynch, but a lot of people I work with are just, they're going to Lost Highway, just turned it off after 5 minutes. And The Crowd probably the same, but The Crowd is just, we went on about it and I could already tell from within like a minute of you going, I'm like, oh, he's picking The Crowd for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just watching it. I'm like, this is my best. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, like, I just really, really responded to it. And I would definitely recommend The Circus just because it's Charlie Chaplin. It's a familiar, scenario, and it's only an hour long.
Yeah,
it's a short one.
The buy-in is not as, I mean, how long was The Crowd though? The Crowd was,
I feel like The Crowd was like 2.5 hours or something. I don't think it was. Maybe it was just under 2, something like that. And
that's the sad thing too. We the one we watched was from the Internet Archive, so this isn't even like a fully restored Crowd.
It looks like crap. Looks like total shit.
So I guess that's it. Well, all right, Cyrus, thank you for being the first guest on the show.
Hey, Kenny, no, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. I really had a good time, and thank you for making me watch these movies because I think it just like gives me a little perspective on, a bygone time.
a bygone era. Yep. All right, and to all of our listeners at home and away from home, our next episode will appear on August 1st. We're trying to do these every month on the 1st of the month. We will have a different host. I know. So I'm sorry, Cyrus. Cyrus might be back at some point, though.
Yeah, maybe. Well, maybe once we get to 1982, I'll come in.
Yeah. Well, once we hit those 60s and sweet 60s, 70s,
we'll be like 60 years old.
Yeah, we'll be much older. Yeah, thanks for coming, and we'll see you at the next Golden Boys.
All right, keep those Golden Boys polished.
That's the main saying we use. It's true. Keep those Golden Boys polished. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the first episode of Golden Boy. I know it's a very long video, but we only put out one video per month, so if they run a little bit long, I don't think that's as big a deal. Just listen to it while you're doing dishes and laundry and whatnot. There'll be another one in a month, unless you get lucky and there's a Hitchcock episode, which there's, spoiler alert, there won't be one next month. In the meantime, if you could hit like and subscribe at the bottom of the video. I hate asking, but I was told that if I don't, nobody will. So that's what I'm here for. Second of all, our second episode coming on August 1st of this year will be the 1930 Academy Awards. So if any of you that want to play along with us and watch the movies, there are 4 movies that are nominated for Best Picture that are available. The 5th one is a lost movie. So we will be reviewing The Broadway Melody, Alibi, In Old Arizona, and The Hollywood Review. And we will be talking about the Patriot trailer. We will also, just because it's going to be a shorter episode, throw in the movie Coquette and have a bit of a discussion about what makes for a Best Actor, Actress. So that's it. Join us next time. Thanks again for liking this video.